It's a heavy thing. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Christopher Iannella Chamber. Thank you for those who are still signing in. I'll just go over some ground rules of the hearing while folks are signing in. The most important one is if you are looking to testify, please make sure that you have signed into the sheet and checked the box yes that says asking whether or not you'd like to testify. In addition to the folks who will be testifying live, we've received a number of written testimony emailed to my office. My name, by the way, is Matt O'Malley. I am the chair of the City Council's Committee on Environment, Sustainability, and Parks. And we are here today to discuss docket number 1421, which is an order for a hearing regarding the Boston Freedom Rally. The sponsors of this hearing order are Councillors Josh Zakem to my left and Ed Flynn to my right. This is something that has been in the news quite a bit lately, and I just wanted to talk about the purpose of this hearing and what we can and cannot do. I think there seems to be some misunderstanding with folks that the City Council sets the permitting process as it relates to large festivals such as the Boston Freedom Rally. We do not. Having said that, we obviously do play a role in the process as we do in development, as we do in a whole host of things that affect our neighborhoods. This is the Boston Common, I think, abuts both District 8, which Councillor Zakem represents, and District 2, which Councillor Flynn represents, which is why they've called this. We've also been joined by an at-large City Councilor, Michelle Wu. Welcome, Councillor Wu. We're going to have two panels for this hearing. The first panel is folks from the administration, including the Chief of Energy, Environment, and Open Space, Chris Cook, BPD Captain Detective Jim Hassan, and BPD Lieutenant Detective Brian Larkin will be on the first panel. The second panel will be Liz Visa, of the Executive Director of the Friends of the Public Garden, who I saw earlier, and Bill Flynn of MassCan. Is Mr. Flynn here yet? Okay, thank you. So Bill Flynn will be on the second panel alongside Liz, and then we will get into public testimony. My request is that we keep things positive, not attack one another. People have some very strong issues on this. Let's have as productive an afternoon as we can. Try to make our points, and most importantly, let's listen to one another. So before I get to the first panel, I'd like to turn it over to the two co-sponsors and then Councillor Wu for any opening statements they may have, and we will start with Councillor Josh Zakem to my left.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all taking the time to be here. By way of introduction, I know Councillor Flynn and I called for this hearing after the most recent Freedom Rally on the Common earlier this year, and sort of a culmination of ongoing issues that we've heard about for the last few years around this event. And I do want to say, as I did say, and I believe Councillor Flynn did too, when we introduced this order, this is not about cannabis being pro or anti-cannabis. This is not about the legalization, no longer debate, which I was a supporter of, but this is about the proper use of city parks. This body, shortly before I joined in 2014, passed an ordinance prohibiting smoking of anything in our public parks. I think that's an important thing to note, and making sure that whatever we're doing is done constructively, and that whether it's this event or any other that takes place on the Boston Common or any of our other city parks, that it is done appropriately, that it is done safely, and that whatever mess or anything else is left is cleaned up afterwards, because obviously the Boston Common, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it from Commissioner Cook, from the Friends, and from others, is really a jewel of the city and needs to be protected. And I'm looking forward to finding a way to make sure that a popular event is able to continue in some form, but making sure that whether it's noise, whether it's trash, whether it's illegal activities happening in the area is not supported and not happening at permanent events. So I look forward to hearing from the administration officials, the police department, our parks department on their plans for this, but also would like to hear from the second panel and from folks who will be testifying later what other alternatives there are. Is City Hall Plaza a place where we've had lots of events in the past a more appropriate area? Obviously, given that it's not a park, it can sustain a lot more wear and tear out there, and we've had a lot of successful events there. So I'd like to hear ideas for how we can make this move forward and make sure that we're doing this constructively as neighbors here in the city of Boston. And thank you all again for being here. Look forward to the testimony.
Thank you, Councillor Zakem. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley, as chair of this committee, for your leadership. I want to say thank you to my colleague, Councillor Zakem, for your leadership as well, opening a dialogue and partnering with me on this important hearing that we're having today. We're here today because anytime our constituents make a complaint to our attention, we take it very seriously. We listen to the concerns of residents in the community impacted. We look to do our due diligence to the best of our ability in following up. We called for this hearing, along with Councillor Zakam, because the areas I represent are impacted significantly, including the downtown crossing area, downtown Boston, Chinatown, parts of Back Bay, Beacon Hill, and it borders the Bay Village as well. We're also pleased to have the strong leadership in the Boston Common and the Public Gardens from the Friends of the Public Garden, and they have expressed concerns regarding this issue as well. Residents, associations relayed to us reports of parked cars on green space, camping in the park, and a substantial amount of trash left in the park. I think it's appropriate for us to look into what's taking place in the past, see if we can come up with a plan to take everything into account, figuring the quality of life issues, and make sure they work for everyone. In the final analysis, the Boston Common is one of the oldest and most beautiful public spaces in the country. Visitors come to Boston to see the Boston Common. We have a lot of children there at the playground, seniors, the disabled, residents in the area, families, tourists. I'm focusing on what needs to be done to make sure our parks remain beautiful and accessible. I know Commissioner Cook has provided great leadership on this issue for many years. It also must be safe, environmentally healthy. These are my strongest concerns for our common. We must work closely with the neighborhood and City Hall to protect those unique qualities. I want to say thank you for the Boston Police for your great work in the Boston Common and in the Public Garden. I do not look for us to try to make some heavy-handed approach as it relates to this matter, but I am concerned about the shape that the Boston Common is in after an event that runs several days. I am curious about the cost for the city in terms of cleanup of the park, repairs that must be made, police details, other services associated with the park. It is my hope that this conversation will help lead to some kind of compromise that helps us alleviate the concerns that neighbors, abutters, residents of the city have expressed to me, and a plan that works for everybody. In the final analysis, I walk through the Common like everybody does almost every single day. I see a lot of children using the playground. I see a lot of tourists enjoying the park. I also represent Chinatown. I see a lot of elderly Chinese that go there early in the morning, and they do their walking around the park. They do their exercises. I have a great relationship with them. They've expressed concerns to me about this. But my point is we need to come up with a compromise, and what's happened in the past can't continue anymore. Those days are over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. And we've also been joined by my District 5 colleague, City Councillor Tim McCarthy. Welcome, Tim. Councillor Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the sponsors for making sure we're having a thorough and productive conversation on this. I just wanted to apologize in advance to everyone that I have to run out in a little bit for another commitment, but hope to be back at the end for public testimony. In any case, we'll be watching. For me, this is an issue like so many others that we think about across the city of balancing all the different communities that we want to make sure feel welcome and are included in our city. I think in this case, we are particularly thinking from a couple different angles of an event that is now known, it puts Boston on the map, not just locally, but nationally. We are looking at a park that similarly has been a signature and jewel of our city for hundreds of years at this point, and all the investments that go into maintaining it. And we're also looking at the enjoyment of the downtown area more broadly to anyone who's visiting Boston, even if you're living there or just passing through on any given day. So I would echo Councillor Zakam's question about why we could, or whether we could consider alternatives like City Hall Plaza that could accommodate a large-scale event, that could accommodate the communities that want to take part, but also would be lessening the impact on the beautiful park that we are already putting in a lot of money to maintain and irrigate and keep up day after day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wu. Councillor McCarthy.
Just quickly, as a longtime Parks Department employee, I have a special love for the parks, and I also have great respect for my fellow colleagues and who represent this area, and Josh Zakam and Councillor Flynn. So I'm just really here to make sure that I give my support to them. I have gotten a lot of emails and calls and it's not even close to being in my district. As everybody knows, I represent Mattapan, Hyde Park, and Rosendale. But having said that, you know, this is an event that negatively affects the immediate neighborhoods, and I don't think that everybody in that in this now, you know, it used to be a one-day political rally, now into a three-day festival. I don't think a lot of those people are from Boston to begin with, maybe a handful. And I think it's time that we start taking care of our immediate neighbors. So I'm here just really to support my fellow councilors and listen in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Now, finally, this is a public hearing, and it is being recorded and broadcast on cable television, as well as streamed at the City of Boston's website, boston.gov. Please silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. If you need to have conversations, I invite you to please step outside and have them. And then finally, applause can often eat into the time here, so please refrain from applause going forward. You can always use jazz hands or spirit fingers if you want to show your agreement. Once again, please sign in the sheet if you would be looking to testify after. We already have a number of sheets, and we will stay as long as it takes so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. Chief Cook, did you have any opening statement?
I do, sir, yeah.
Okay, please.
Councilors, thank you very much for holding this hearing today regarding the Boston Freedom Rally. Since the 1990s, the City of Boston, specifically the Boston Parks and Recreation Department, in partnership with the City of Boston's Law Department, has legally challenged this event, and we've been to court more than 6 times. This is not an event that we support or endorse. Specifically, the event is a direct contradiction to the city's ordinance that prohibits smoking in Boston parks. The courts have allowed this event to continue despite our concerns over illicit drug use, damage to park property, commercial vending, and amplified music. We must respect the court's decision and the First Amendment rights of the participants. However, even within these decades of context, this past year's edition of the Freedom Rally was singular in its disrespect of America's first park. As Mayor Martin J. Walsh noted the next day, and I quote, "As a city, we take tremendous pride in our public spaces, and the conditions that we saw in the aftermath of this weekend's Boston Freedom Rally are both appalling and unacceptable," end quote. Annually, this event usually takes days for the common to recover. That is days of downtown residents and tourists walking past trash and drug paraphernalia. This year, we were also left with damaged turf and irrigation from vehicles, tree damage, cooking oil-stained walkways and dead grass, and dumpsters worth of waste strewn across this landmark. This event creates an inequity, pulling staff out of our neighborhoods. Kids in Hyde Park, Roxbury, and East Boston deserve to have clean parks come Monday. They shouldn't all be pulled down to Boston Common. Boston Common is no stranger to large events. In 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke in the park to protest racial inequities. Pope John Paul II celebrated Mass on Boston Common in 1979. In January of 2017, more than 100,000 participants gathered in and around the park to peacefully protest for the Boston Women's March. That day, we sent the maintenance division home early because the park was spotless after the event. These are free speech events. This event, the reason we're here today, is commercial activity. It is inconsistent with the cultural and family-friendly events that the Boston Parks Department presents and supports in our parks. We will continue to work with the City of Boston Law Department to discuss our options moving forward. Your support and input is invaluable to this process. We are very grateful to our colleagues at the Friends of the Public Garden and our downtown residents associations who have helped document this year's event. This documentation resulted in the written communication I have provided the council from myself to the festival organizer regarding permit violations. I'm more than happy to go through the contents of that letter if it pleases the council. And at this time, I'm prepared to answer any questions the council might have.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, remember, spirit fingers. Captain, Lieutenant, did you have any opening statement as well, or do you want to get right into questions?
Not at this point.
Quite all right. Quite all right. Thank you, Captain Detective. Councillor Zakim, we'll begin with the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner. So I have just a couple questions. I mean, one thing that really strikes me that is new this year, aside from, I think, the documented issues in the aftermath of this, the trash and the damage to the common, is that, you know, this body recently approved around $30 million for capital investment in the Boston Common, in the public garden. That came about through a long process around Winthrop Square, working with the friends, neighbors, to invest in this and to make sure that we're protecting the common. So I have a concern in general with large-scale repeated events, particularly ones that are commercial in nature, about doing that. And has there been any discussion with the law department? Now, I'm not practicing anymore, but I am a lawyer. And, you know, a standard policies around this that don't infringe on people's First Amendment rights. And secondly, as far as a strategy approach, what both the Rangers and maybe something for BPD to address as well, approaches on violations, whether we're talking about drinking beer or wine on the common, we're talking about smoking marijuana on the common, we're talking about anything else, because I do want to commend, and I know Captain Fong from A1 isn't here, but they have done a really phenomenal job the last few years of addressing other substance issues and, you know, criminal activity on the common just in the few years I've been on this body. So this can be addressed, and I'm wondering what the approach is on this event or other events, other large-scale events.
No, it's an excellent question. I do think there's an opportunity for a reset switch on Boston Common with the investments from the Winthrop Square Garage. And in fact, at this moment, we're actually negotiating an MOA with the Friends of the Public Garden currently that'll help guide those investments and guide our relationship as far to who manages what as far as irrigation systems or daily maintenance activities on the common, because they're really our partners in the park. Annually, they spend over $2 million in the three parks, the Public Garden, Boston Common, and the Commonwealth Avenue Mall. As part of that process, we're going to take a look at updating the Boston Common Management Plan, which frankly has been largely ignored since it was actually created in the 1990s. And, you know, in that management plan, it set things like decibel levels, it set what was appropriate for the types of events and the duration of those events that would be on the Boston Common. So I think as we approach this capital investment in the park, it's also an opportune time to look at our operations of the park and update those rules and procedures. Yeah,
and I will say I'm a little disappointed the law department isn't here. I know that they have done a lot of work on this, but some of these, you know, questions, and maybe this is cause for either another hearing or a working session of some kind, is what we can do in a uniform fashion on our parks and green space. I'll say, you know, I live along the Com Ave Mall. I like to smoke a cigar once in a while, but there was an ordinance passed a few years ago. I no longer go out on the Com Ave Mall to smoke a cigar because that's illegal in the city of Boston, and I'm certainly not allowed to smoke it in my own home. My wife would have real concerns with that. But this, I mean, I say that, and I'm making light of it a little bit because while the smoking issue is it's not a public safety issue. I don't think it's dangerous to happen, but this body has passed a law of uniform applicability across the city of Boston and all our parks and green spaces to ensure that they're enjoyable and open to everyone. And I'm not just children, adults, whomever, people who don't want to smell cigarette smoke, marijuana smoke, cigar smoke, pipe smoke, hookah smoke, whatever kind of smoke is out there. So the question is, for you, maybe for the Rangers and maybe Captain and Lieutenant, to talk about what the BPD's approach is generally to smoking or other ordinance violations in the parks, and what we can be doing around these large-scale events to enforce that rule.
So generally, I think the most important thing is the education piece, and, you know, signage is a key part of that. And recently in Boston Common, we've actually deployed, you know, A-frame sandwich boards to remind people that it's no smoking. As far as the issuance of tickets, the Boston Park Rangers have issued citations in the past. I'd be lying if I said that was effective. I think it's really an education tool to promote as a public health initiative. I think that's the most effective strategy as far as letting people know about the rule. I will say just very briefly in general to your earlier point about special events and what is prohibited in Boston parks. Early next year, we're hoping to propose to the City Council special events guidelines. That would perhaps result in a fee schedule or some sort of ordinance that guides major special events in city parks. so that we don't have this ad hoc approach to different events.
From the BPD perspective on enforcement, either at this event in particular or more broadly?
Although we also enforce that ordinance throughout the year, but since over the last few years, we've scaled down the number of officers that we've assigned to this particular event. We went from, in terms of cost, from 2015, was for the BPD cost about $51,000. In 2018, it was about $8,700. So what that means is we have fewer officers patrolling that event. So we tend to stay on the periphery of this event because our main concern is public safety. And we don't feel it's at that particular event that it's appropriate to start enforcing the city ordinances because of fear of inciting the crowd, and because at that point, so we just kind of stay on the periphery and watch out for public safety issues that for fighting and those types of activities.
So police officers who are assigned to this are instructed to not focus on or not to make citations for smoking in the parks or anything else?
Well, especially so because it would tie up the resources. So if because it's a strong likelihood that it would incite the crowd, so it could increase the potential charges. Then it would take the officers offline, bring them back to the stations, and would have fewer and fewer officers at that event. So it's we feel it's a good decision to just maintain public safety on that day.
Well, I certainly agree. Public safety is the most important. I would say if we are concerned about a violent crowd, that's another reason to move this event off of Boston Common. But that is concerning that's an approach that's taken. And a matter of resources, I think certainly this body would want to support increased resources and making sure that people are doing this, and especially with the sale of any illicit substances, whether it's an interesting article in the Globe today about the opening of recreational marijuana dispensaries, and that's something I'm a supporter of. But those are heavily licensed. If we had someone selling nips of vodka or whiskey out in the common, I would expect that that's a violation of both state and state law and city ordinances. So, is there a way, or has this been addressed in the past, that as far as the sale of cannabis products?
Well, those are the types of infractions that we enforce on that day: distribution and maintaining public order. But so to try to start issuing these citations, there's really no teeth for us to demand somebody's activity. Identity. So whereas you mentioned alcohol, it's written right in the law. If you don't produce an ID that you're 21, then it's immediately arrestable. But they can give any name they want. There's no way for us to make somebody give us a name.
And that's something we've discussed with our colleagues at the State House in the past. But as far as going and making arrests or citations, do any of you have the figures for last year or the year before, either citations or arrests around this event?
We've not around this event in particular, but around the Boston Common. Lieutenant Detective Larkin's drug squad has made over 201 arrests in the last year for drugs in the Common. So,
year to date, Sergeant Detective Billy Dwan runs a drug squad down in District 1 here. They cover the Common. Year to date, they've had 201 instances where they've arrested somebody or summoned them into court for drug offenses or arrest warrants that were outstanding and whatnot. Yeah. But relative to this particular yearly event, Captain's already talked a lot about it, but this isn't one person smoking a cigarette on the Common. This is thousands of people that are, I'm sure, well aware that it's against the law to smoke in a public place. And it's really very, very difficult to enforce that, people smoking when there's that much of a volume of people. As far as people who are selling drugs down there, we have made arrests in the past down there. We used to go down there years ago, the police department would put hundreds of police officers down there, and at one point in time, set up tents and book them and everything right down there on the common.
It was easier before the decriminalization.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
but
now, because that's what it fell
Yeah.
into, more like the alcohol statute. But now, with the decriminalization, it's very difficult.
And I know, and Lieutenant, you know, the work of, you know, the men and women in your unit, it has been noticeable, and I hear about it, you know, across the district I represent. When we have called and asked for additional resources, it's happening, you know, on a day-to-day basis, not event-based, has really been great, and I appreciate that. I guess I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I don't want to monopolize the time here. I guess what I would like to see as moving forward is that we can figure out a plan to preserve the First Amendment rights of anyone who wants to use Boston Common, preserve the enjoyability, but also I don't think it's particularly healthy to just ignore the laws, and if it's a question of resources, if this body can be more supportive to you and the men and women who work with you in the Boston Police Department to make sure that we're maintaining safety the best we can, but also you know, enforcing the rules of the City of Boston is something very important moving forward. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Councillor Zachem. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. Commissioner Cook, do you have an idea of how much money the Parks Department has spent before the event and after the event cleaning it up?
Yeah, sure, Councillor. So this year, our OT costs, and those are really the only costs that we can capture because they're the only ones that we can actually attribute to the event specifically. This year, we were at $10,100. In years past, we've been as high as $20,000. The reason we were less this year is we could not justify pulling our district crews out of our neighborhood parks again this year. The event itself is supposed to provide a trash management plan, which obviously they didn't implement.
So the event is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. When does the Park Department start cleaning it? Sunday afternoon?
We actually clean it every evening as well.
And when is it completely cleaned following the event?
Typically 3 days after, Councillor, and to be honest with you, we have remnants of, you know, drug paraphernalia and other pieces of trash for weeks afterwards in the parade grounds.
So to use the park for the community of Chinatown that wants to do their exercises, or the children that go to the playground.
That's right.
More likely it's Thursday that they're able to use a clean and healthy park?
Well, we make obviously we make our best effort on that first day, and we try to get the bulk of it, but yeah, no, it often takes days for it to be completely clean, and, you know, I have to say that, you know, this is within the context of a major urban park and a major municipality. So when you have groups like the Spruce Street Daycare, I mean, they have to do needle sweeps before they allow their kids to play just because of the awareness of the opioid crisis. But there's no other event that creates the volume of trash in any of our parks like this one.
So the Parks Department is working closely with Public Works. Public Works comes into the park as well? They
do, Councillor, and they're very gracious about it. They actually don't even cross-charge us on it. What they'll do is at the end of the event, they'll actually bring in the street sweepers overnight to try to help us get some of the oil and some of the other embedded trash off the pathways, the macadam pathways. In terms of prices, finances, so that price is not included yet? No. What Public Works? No, that's just them redistributing their nightly crews. What type of physical repairs has Public Works or the parks done following the event? So this year we had some minor irrigation hose damage, which is only concerning considering that it's still the growing season when you're looking at September. So that's a time of year that we'd like to keep those systems operational. There's been some bench damage, but to be honest with you, that could happen in any major event. What was concerning this year is there were images of tree damage, and obviously it's much more difficult to keep those trees healthy. They're already living in a dynamic urban environment. And Commissioner, I know Councillor Zachem talked about this. You know, no one's against the legalization of marijuana, but
what type of compromise could we work on? Instead of having a 3-day event, could we look at having a 1-day event? And would the organizers be willing to work with the city on that request?
It's an excellent question for the organizers, Councillor. I will say that, you know, we're reactive to what they actually request for the permit, but if the question is the Boston Parks Department willing to work with the organizers to minimize the impact on the park, that the answer to that would be a resounding yes.
Okay, and I know I mentioned it in my opening statement, but, you know, taking the park away from these young kids in the playground, not giving them an opportunity to use it, and the Chinese community that uses the park as well, elderly Chinese that do their exercises. I mean, we have to do better than that. No, I'm not blaming anyone, but we have to do better than that. If elderly people in Chinatown want to use the park to exercise and they can't use it because of this festival and it's not cleaned. I did get a lot of complaints from my residents about that issue, and we take it very seriously. I just want to make sure the park is healthy, is clean, is vibrant for everybody. And I hope the organizers can understand that. It's not about them, but it's about helping people use the park in a productive manner.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor McCarthy?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Chief, just a quick question. Could you just walk me through, because I've read a lot of the emails, and they're generally not my constituents, to be honest with you. But one struck me in particular. She coaches up there, and she lives in the neighborhood, and she described it as going from a one-day kind of political rally to a 3-day festival. So how did it go from a 1-day to a 3-day without having that put the brakes on there? And then secondly, now that marijuana has been legalized, why are we having a freedom rally anyway? Is that not a good question to ask? Because it just seems to me that it's legal now, so just do it somewhere else where people aren't going to be bothered. Is that too much to ask?
So I think I'll answer the first question.
The second one's more of a statement.
So I think I'll answer the first question, which is at different points since the 1990s, the Parks Department, with the aid of the Law Department, has challenged different aspects of this event. I will say, when it went to a 3rd day, the challenge wasn't necessarily on the 3rd day, although that is something that was greatly concerning to the Parks Department, because frankly, our concern is, well, why not an entire week? I mean, at what point is the Boston Parks Department allowed to actually regulate? If we can't regulate Boston Common, America's first park, then why do we enforce any rules in any of our 330 properties? So at what point are we actually going to be allowed to actually implement rules and regulations to govern this piece of open space that's supposed to be dedicated to the public? So, but I will say the last time that we fought in court was about the commercial vending and our ability to keep our vendors on Boston Common and not have to be subject to this idea that the event could just have commercial vending on the property and displace our vendors. And we lost on that. You know, perhaps a better avenue would have been actually fighting the addition of the 3rd day. I don't know. What I will say, though, is as far as the evolution of the event, in fairness to the organizers, if attendance is a measure of success, it is a enormously successful event. I mean, it is very, very well attended. There does not seem, and this in part relates to your second question, there does not seem to be a strong, consistent political message, although there's definitely political messages throughout the day in the event. And in my 5 years as commissioner, I've attended the event all but 1 year. But what there definitely is an enormous amount of commercial activity. And I think that's what the event has actually evolved into, is not dissimilar to other major festivals that you would find throughout the region.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just, I get how it began, but I don't get why it needs to continue. And I do agree with the councilors whose district this is in. City Hall Plaza is brick. you certainly can't damage the brick. I mean, I guess you could if you really tried, but I don't see that happening. And you know, I certainly, as you do, and you know my love for the parks. It's disappointing to know that much damage is being done to America's First Park. It's disappointing that we hold everybody else who holds a festival to a higher standard of making sure that their trash maintenance plan is clean, whether it's the Puerto Rican festival or whatever festival we're talking about. The taxpayers who live in the city of Boston and the businesses that work in the city of Boston, that have property in the city of Boston, don't need to be paying for other people's messes. That's just simple, and that's just factual. And so I'm looking forward to where it goes. I'm certainly looking forward to hearing from the organizers and how they can describe a commercial vehicle on the common, and we'll go from there. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councilor McCarthy. So for my questioning, I want to sort of take a step back and look at it more process-oriented, and Chief, you touched upon these in a number of your answers to my colleagues' questions. Explain to me right now how the process works.
Sure.
Any organization wants to have a rally or a festival or an event on the Boston Common. What do they do?
Sure. So the first step is we now have an online portal for pulling a permit. That permit would be pulled at that time. The permit office of the Boston Parks and Recreation Department would evaluate the permit, see if there's any conflicts. If there's no conflicts and there's minimal impact, frankly, the person would be issued the permit. Major events that actually pull permits, though, where we think that there'll be other multiple departments that would be impacted by such an event, whether it's the Boston Police Department or the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority or the Boston Transportation Department, we'll schedule them for the Special Events Committee. The Special Events Committee is a unified committee. They don't actually have any permit-making ability. It's the individual departments that actually grant permits. So ultimately, it would be the Parks Department that will issue that permit. But that event organizer would meet with the Special Events Committee, hopefully address any concerns that the individualized departments would have, whether it's transportation or public works, or make sure that there's no conflicts with major construction in the area if it's spilling past the parks borders into the streets. And at that time, following successful completion of that, if they were deemed that they would need an entertainment license, they would get an entertainment license through the licensing division. If they don't need that entertainment license, the Parks Department would just issue the permit.
Okay, so it's some good oversight is there, and I assume, without getting to too many specifics, that in years past where you've talked about litigation, the Parks Department or some step along the way, the Freedom Rally was denied a permit, and then that triggered a lawsuit?
Yeah, and the specifics, I would have to get the chronology because I wouldn't want to make any mistakes. But ultimately, we have been instructed by judges on numerous times to issue the permit. Okay.
And is it the same fee for any event, be it the Women's March, be it a much smaller, so to speak, or a larger venue such as this?
That's right. So there's a small processing fee for the permit application, but essentially there are no fees. And this is, to Councillor Zacum's earlier point, we're hoping to update a fee schedule and special events permitting application with the Parks Department over the course of the next year, because it's probably inconsistent from a taxpayer's perspective that a Little League pays essentially the same as a major event on Boston Common, which is nothing.
And particularly, I would agree with that particularly if there is a revenue generating mechanism at those things. And so I, like my colleagues, absolutely love the Common, love the Public Garden, jog through it several times a week. You'll see folks there with, roasted peanuts or fried dough or, T-shirts that they're selling. Do they have permits to do that?
They do. Yeah, those are our vendors that are through our vending program. Historically, 5 years ago, that vending program was administered by the Boys and Girls Club of Boston. We have since taken that in-house, and so we issue those permits on an annualized basis.
Okay.
And it's those vendors that are actually either accommodated through the organizers or displaced from this event.
Okay. So when an event were to come, I'm drawing back on my on the Women's March ending there several years ago, which we both attended. those vendors were probably displaced because just the sheer volume of people who were there.
That's right, sir.
So with an event such as the Freedom Rally, are they still there, or is there displacement because the organization, I know some of these questions will be saved for the next panel, but I guess I'm just trying to sort of wrap my head around what exactly the process is, and perhaps there's an opportunity here to alleviate some concerns.
It's an excellent question for the organizers. Some of the vendors are brought into the event if they're willing to pay into the event, others are displaced.
Okay. And I assume, well, again, I'll wait for the next panel to get into that specific question. And then is there been some of the emails that I've read, and again, I'll get into it more with the next panel, but I guess from a public safety standpoint, what time does the park officially close?
It's at 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock at night. And how does it work now if someone is sleeping in the park overnight?
Well, I used to be the captain
Yeah.
in this area, and generally would send police through the park at 11 and keep people moving. We
Yeah.
don't allow that to happen.
And typically, if it's someone who's homeless, struggling with addiction, we try to get them
Bring
help
them
and
to-
support
yeah,
into.
bring them to, Boylston Street or down at the shelter at 794 Mass Ave or somewhere.
No, I've worked with you for years, Captain. I appreciate your commitment to that, to helping those who particularly need it. I'm talking about in events other than the Freedom Rally specifically, but that's something I want to get to as well. All right, that's all I have for this panel. Do my colleagues have questions for this panel before we go to the next? No. Okay, thank you, Tim. Good. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your good work. You are dismissed, and I'd now like to invite Liz Visa, the Executive Director of Friends of the Public Garden, and Bill Flynn, who is with Mass Can, to please join us at the front. I'm sorry, folks. We have Liz and Bill, and
I'm John Suam Lee. I'm the lawyer for Mass Can. I would like to be able to sit with him and advise him. We have some lawyers here, and I think that, I don't think that's necessary. Frankly, I think I actually have many of the answers you asked of the Parks Department, because I've been the one that sued the city every single year since 1994. So I actually have a great institutional memory of what's going on here.
all right. We are going to recess this. Just a sec. Yeah. And sir, I'm sorry. You can't stay here. We're going to have a quick recess, and we're going to sort this out. But please, if you're not here, you can't be on the floor. So we will recess this hearing for just a couple minutes. The hearing is brought back to order. I'm sorry, Mr. Flynn, we've decided that we're going to have one, to be fair, as was promised, we're going to have one person from each side. So it can be you or it can be your attorney. It can't be both. Thank you. So, Liz, we will begin with you. Did you have a presentation? Okay.
I think this is on. Great. Okay, yeah, I'll be using a PowerPoint for my presentation. Okay. My name is Liz Visa, and I'm the Executive Director of the Friends of the Public Garden. We work in partnership with the city to renew, care, and advocate for the Boston Common, the Public Garden, and the Commonwealth Avenue Mall. The Friends is an essential partner with the Boston City Parks Department to ensure that these three parks get the resources they need for maintenance and enhancement in order to serve the millions of people who use them every year. In 2019, we will be spending over $2 million for parks care and programs, which includes trees, turf, soil, and sculpture care, as well as capital improvement projects. I am here to testify on behalf of the Friends, as well as a larger coalition of voices around the parks, including the Bay Village Neighborhood Association, Beacon Hill Business Association, Beacon Hill Civic Association, Chinatown Residents Association, Downtown Boston Residents Association, Hill House, the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay, Park Street School, and Spruce Street School. This coalition represents over 55,000 residents from all of these communities who consider the Common their neighborhood park, as well as schools and organizations serving over 2,000 families of Boston's children and youth who regularly use the Common. We are here because we oppose the continued destructive use of Boston Common for the Boston Freedom Rally due to its flagrant violation of the conditions of their permit. This is not about free speech, which we fully support. This is not about marijuana and its legalization and use. Free speech, however, does not justify multiple violations of a permit. The issued permit requires the organizers to keep the site clean throughout the event. Each year, this event leaves a troublesome amount of trash behind, but this year was the worst we have ever seen. There were mountains of trash, including paper, cardboard boxes, cans of cooking oil, and plastic bags of trash. On the first day of the event, cars drove onto the Common from multiple non-vehicular entrances, creating unsafe conditions at the pedestrian entrances for people walking through the park. And if you look at the map, those blue arrows indicate the only authorized vehicular entrance at the corner of Charles and Beacon Street. Cars were flowing in the mid-block crossing on Charles Street, the entrance by Charles and Boylston, and an entrance along Tremont Street, and they were driving through the park on pedestrian paths. Scores of cars were parked on lawns, also a violation of the permit. There were also many tents set up and people sleeping in the park overnight, which is not only a permit violation, but a violation of park regulations. The Common is the most heavily used park in the city by a huge order of magnitude, and as you've heard, it's America's first public park. It's these hundreds of permitted events every year, many with tens of thousands of participants, including runs and walks. We see these well-organized events take place on Boston Common each year, and none causes the amount of damage and disruption that the Freedom Rally does. This is a sentence from their permit for this year. Any violations of the aforementioned rules and regulations will result in the immediate revocation of permit and suspension of permit privileges. And I just outlined a number of permit violations and showed you that evidence. As you heard earlier, the Boston Freedom Rally started as a one-day event and took up a relatively limited amount of space in the park with no overnight camping. It became a two-day event several years ago, and last year it grew to 3 days. And that red area is the extent of this year. As this event has grown over the years, both the number of days, number of participants, and coverage on the Common, it was 50% larger this year, moving all the way to Parkman Bandstand, which is the lower area of that red. It has reached the point where the organizers have failed to be able to manage it. We have heard complaints from community members over the years, but the frustrations and call for action on the part of the city has only grown with the event's growth and unmanaged execution. I want to read a selection of comments from letters we've received about the event, both from Boston residents as well as people visiting our city. This event is a disgrace to the city. I have no objection to cannabis, but I do have an objection to violating the city and park ordinances, smoking, littering, parking on the grass, camping overnight. My door is on Branch Street, and over the years during this event, we have been subjected to urination, slashed tires, drug use, and leftover hypodermic needles on our street. This is a letter from 2014. The size of the gathering, the destruction to the turf, the garbage that is left, and the blatant disregard for the rules that govern meetings on the Common are problems that have escalated over the years. This is a TripAdvisor comment from last year. Drugs being done, sleeping on benches, just disgusting. It's a shame because it should be welcoming to families, couples, singles, would never walk here alone. Shameful. We observed multiple tents with occupants in it long after the activities were supposed to end, not to mention the river of trash that lined the walkways. It looked nothing like the oldest city park in the entire country that everybody should be proud of, and more like a giant 50-acre dumpster. And this last one, this is from somebody that comes from out of town every year for a family reunion. She sent this to us before the event this year. I've traveled to Boston mid-September for an annual family reunion from Miami, Florida. Unfortunately, in previous years, we've encountered disturbing activity at an event on the Boston Common, and just realized it will again be on this event weekend. I will have children and family members with me and do not want them exposed to the drug selling, smoking, obscene behavior that is advertised and I have witnessed in the past years. Flouting of the permit, disruption and unacceptable damage to the park, and provoking the frustration of many who do not feel comfortable or safe going to the park during this event has created an unacceptable situation on the city's central and most intensively used park. Promises have not been kept year after year. These pictures and these comments make it very clear that the Freedom Rally should be relocated to a site that can better handle it. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it. And sir, I didn't catch your name.
My name is John Suam Lee. I'm a cooperating attorney for the ACLU. I have represented the ACLU and MassCan on behalf of the ACLU since 1994, I believe, is when I first began. I am the person that is responsible for every single lawsuit that you have suffered over the years, and I would point out that we have won every single one of them. And we have won them because of the absurd, obscene, and untruthful allegations that have been made against MassCan over the years. I don't need to go into them, but I will go into the ones that have been just leveled today. First of all, let's start with needles. MassCan is a marijuana advocacy organization. They're not a heroin advocacy organization, and to my knowledge, you cannot ingest marijuana by shooting up. To blame MassCan for any of the needles that find their way onto the park is actually insulting, frankly, and it shows a total lack of understanding of what it is that MassCan is doing and trying to do. There has never been a violent crowd that MassCan has produced by opening their arms to the public since 1990, I believe or 1991. I started at, I think, the 4th annual rally, and that rally, I was asked by the MassCan and by the ACLU to help MassCan because of the graft that was going on with the Boston Police Department. The Boston Police Department every single year would demand money from MassCan. And it was literally my job to haggle with them over how many people we had to pay.
Sir, all right, get to your point, because I will not sit here while you bring up unsubstantiated allegations about the Boston Police Department.
You sat here while you heard all of these allegations.
Okay, and don't point at Ms. Visa. Out of a courtesy, I've allowed you to testify in the second panel, and I would strongly urge you to change your tone and have a substantive conversation with the members of the Boston City Council. Otherwise, this will be a waste of everybody's time.
So MassCan, and I was among them, were invited to go visit the Friends of the Public Garden. And we went there. And we actually asked them for any documentation that they had about the things that that they wanted to talk with you about here today. They refused to give MassCan any documentation of that. We have no evidence that, that there were people setting up beforehand. We have no evidence that monetary transactions for merchandise concerning vendors selling before the official event time took place. We have none of that. All we have is assertions. And in fact, you say you don't want to take anecdotal evidence, or you don't want to take unsubstantiated evidence. That is precisely what you did with the last panel. No one provided you with any documentary evidence of any kind, and you, I presume, are choosing to credit the responses that they gave as if they were fact, and that you might even credit the responses of the Friends of the Boston Garden as fact. We went to that meeting asking for any documentation. It was clear as a result of that meeting that they were sandbagging, meaning they did not want to tell us anything that we might be able to meaningfully respond to. We'd be happy to meaningfully respond to any of the concerns that they have, but they would not give us any evidence of it, and I haven't heard it here today. I saw some little pictures outlining areas where they claim there is trash. I saw some pictures of trash. I don't know when that picture was taken. It clearly was not MassCan's best year. But that does not mean that MassCan does not have a right to protest at the Common. And Mr. Zakim, if you, and I don't know whether it was Mr. Zakim or Mr. McCarthy, but Mr. Flynn said no one is against legalization of marijuana, and now that it's legal, why do we need to have this rally? First of all, to say that no one is against legalization, even now, is not a fair statement in the state of Massachusetts. There are referendums all over the state. There are cities that are turning down marijuana businesses that come. There is plenty of regulation and discrimination and prevention of legalization to reach its full fruition. And for the City Council to say that we're all in favor of legalization, I've never seen any of you at any of the past rallies carrying signs or advocating legalization. Maybe that's not your cup of tea, but the reality is it is the cup of tea for a number of people, and they have a right to express themselves. Now, MassCan is willing and to work with, and in fact, we went to that meeting hoping to find some ability to achieve some common ground. I'm not the spokesman for common ground. The spokesman for common ground you wouldn't let sit here because it would be 2 against 1. I'm fine doing everything except talking about the minutia of trash pickup and things like that. I do not have those kinds of details. What I do have, however, is an enormous history with this organization. And the Common is not the playground for the people who live around it or your constituents, Mr. Zakim, any more than it is the first place in this country where free speech was allowed. It is the cradle of liberty. This is the cradle of liberty, and that you want to help the well-heeled folk that have managed to buy property around the Common to the detriment of free speech is insulting to your father's name, frankly.
Okay.
Respond to that, Matt. I'm going to respond to that. John, you obviously came here looking for a fight, and if you want to fight, you're going to get one.
Sir?
You shut your mouth. You're going to come here and insult me. Insult my family. My father, who used cannabis while he was dying of cancer. I myself, who has been a supporter of cannabis. You want to come up here and start a fight. And we're talking about uniform applications. You're a civil rights attorney, or so you say, and you don't obviously understand that there are rules that are uniformly applied across the city of Boston, that just because you're saying you're pro-cannabis, which is fine, I am a supporter of the First Amendment, of civil rights, and of protests. And if you want to come here and say, because that's what you're doing, you're allowed to violate the laws of the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts in this program, is unacceptable.
How have I violated the law, sir?
Your organization here is having marijuana smoking. It encourages it. They do not follow the rules of their permits. And we're talking about a uniform standard here for the use of our parks. If you want to come here and fling insults, we can talk about this outside. Completely unacceptable, and you do it again, and we are going to.
So let's talk about
Mr. Swamy, I think that's a good point. That was your opening statement.
Could I respond to
No,
Mr.
you couldn't.
Zakin?
You couldn't.
Why
You
not?
can't respond because
Why
I'm the
not?
chair and this is my hearing and that's how I get to run it. You've
Like
made your point. Ms. Visa, thank you. We're going to begin the questions of this panel, and we'll start with Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. And I'll start with Liz. Liz, I had the opportunity to walk by the rally, the most recent rally, and I agree with everything you said and everything you documented. I've seen the same mess that was on the Common. What is frustrating to me also is, the Friends of the Public Garden work so hard raising money, putting their own money in at times to make the park look beautiful. And you do that not just for yourself, you do it for a lot of people that really don't have the ability to raise that type of money, such as my community in Chinatown, very low-income residents there. So your work is greatly appreciated on behalf of so many people. And I just don't like to see anyone unfairly criticize you or the Friends of the Public Garden as being out of touch or being elitist, because I represent the entire neighborhood of Chinatown, and so they're without a lot of money, they're without a lot of access to high-powered lawyers, but they do have a city council that work hard on their behalf, and so that's our job. Our job is to represent people that don't have the ability to hire lawyers such as yourself.
I'm not paid, sir. I'm not paid at all.
But let me finish. Let me finish. Don't interrupt.
That's an unfair accusation. I am not a high-paid lawyer.
The councillor is asking the question. Proceed.
So, Liz, what recommendation may you have, whether it's a compromise or to work together in terms of, would it be acceptable to have possibly a one-day rally, or to have more structure, or to have more guidelines for the organizers prior to the issuing of a permit? Is that something we could hopefully work on?
Well, I think one of the challenges is that there have been guidelines that's called the permit, and there are very clear requirements of the permit. And those requirements, whether it's picking up trash, sleeping overnight, cars driving in unauthorized entrances, scores of cars parked on the lawns, and other things that I think other people will address in their comments from the community and not from ourselves. But I think they have had guidelines, and they have not honored those guidelines consistently. We have been, as I said, I am speaking not just for the Friends, but for all of the neighborhoods around this park that have felt increasingly frustrated and increasingly disenchanted with the use of the park for the Freedom Rally. We support free speech. We support an event. It's not a question about this event happening, but it has been mentioned before that City Hall plazas would be perhaps, I'm not proposing it, but there are other places that this event can take place and not impact 55,000 residents and more tens of thousands of people that come to the park, and also flaunt the permit the way they have.
Thank you, Liz. And Council, would you and your organization be open to a compromise in terms of possibly having the event for one day?
We've discussed, and I'm not a member of MassCan. I am their representative.
Well, as their lawyer,
as their lawyer, I have been part of conversations that have been had that have talked about reducing the number of days. I think that reducing it one day back to two is what was it discussed, and that is something that is reasonable. And I think that, well, I don't speak for the organization in every capacity. My understanding is that's something they're willing to do. They're also willing to discuss other vendors, trash containment. That is not what there's a fight about. There's not a fight about that.
How many vendors are allowed on the Common, or how many do you usually have?
I do not know the answers to those questions. I do know the answers to some of the questions about sleeping and driving on the Common.
Well, we'll get to those.
Okay.
So do you have a rough estimate of how many vendors there are?
No. I deal with the legal aspects of their...
Could you tell us how much the organizers have made on this rally?
They don't make money. They're a nonprofit organization. They defray the costs of free speech.
The vendors, how much, do we have an idea of how much the vendors would normally make?
I have no idea.
How would someone get a permit to sell marijuana or to sell it on the common like that?
No one would get a permit to sell marijuana based upon my understanding of the laws.
So where would they get the marijuana from on the common?
Who?
The participants.
The participants, if by that you mean the people who are invited to the rally, those individuals can either bring it themselves or I don't know where they get it. And I'm hearing a hiss that's going on here. Is something leaking over there?
So there's no drug dealing, there's no marijuana dealing on the Boston Common?
I can't say that. I have no idea whether there is marijuana dealing on the common. I can tell you that MassCan does not sell marijuana on the common. Period. Ever. In fact, MassCan doesn't sell marijuana. It is an advocacy organization.
I have other questions, but you're probably not I want to get more specific in terms of how much about the funding, the permitting, the groups that are selling various stuff on the common. I'd like to get some information about that. Maybe you can provide information, maybe you can't, but if you're not able to, can you provide us some written documents after?
What I can tell you is that my understanding of the organization is they do not permit their vendors to engage in any illegal activity. If they have done so, they should be either kicked off, kicked out, never allowed back, or some other punishment. And I do know that that's what was done when that was brought to the organizers' attention at this last year's rally. I've been to almost every rally. I skipped this last year's rally, mostly because I agreed with him. I thought we didn't have to fight about this anymore. But obviously I was wrong, and I will be attending every rally henceforth simply to make sure that I know exactly what everyone else knows. Now, I have seen, and I've been to past events where there have been trash, and I personally, even though I'm not required to, have gone and picked up trash. And in fact, I've watched every member of MassCan walk around with a trash can doing precisely that, trying to urge the crowd. And the crowd does throw their things on the ground.
How many people attend the rally?
I don't know exact numbers, but I know that we have said over 50,000 at one point in time, I believe. I don't. Used to be everyone would compact in near the stage. Now it has become, as it's become legal, it has become more of a festival than a fight.
Can you understand my concerns of representing a community that borders the common or public garden, such as the homeless community, such as the Chinatown community? They may not have money, they may not have political access or legal representation, but they love the common, they love being out there, exercising, taking it all in. They like enjoying it. Kids, parents that don't have any money, they use the playground to take their kids there for a couple of hours. Can you understand their concern, or do you have any compassion for them about their use of the park?
Deeply. And in fact, I volunteer my time giving my legal services free to the Episcopal Archdiocese, which has its headquarters there and has a ministry to the homeless people. I know the homeless priest there. I work with her. I work with her when homeless people get in trouble that are part of her flock. I work with her in helping other members of the congregation that practices there or practices their faith there, and they have an Islamic worship service that they allow within the Episcopal Archdiocese. So they have a lot of Muslim folk coming there.
Sir, can you understand my concern of elderly people that like using the Boston Common to exercise, that they can't use it during that period of time because it's not clean?
So I was telling you that I have compassion for some of the people you were just talking about.
So
now you're asking me to expand my compassion. Okay, I think I can expand my compassion, but I don't work with them. So
okay.
I do have compassion. And I have compassion for people that want to do Tai Chi on the Common. I've seen that. But they don't need to do Tai Chi on the day that we're having this rally. or in the area where this rally is going on.
Well, sir, those are the people that I represent, and
Okay.
they live in the area, and they contribute to the city, and they contribute to making this park beautiful, and they would like to use the Boston Common during that period of time. I'm just asking you respectfully, would you be more compassionate to those people? Will you be more understanding?
I'm happy to be both compassionate and understanding. However, the times when I am called into service, just to be fair, are the times when the City of Boston, Parks Department, behaves disrespectfully to people's free speech rights. And I have actually a fairly decent track record proving that we were right and the City of Boston was wrong. And we talk about permitting and doing things in advance so we don't have troubles. I have urged every one of these special meetings that have been had, and I've gone to them, that are done in advance. And I've said, can we work all this out in advance? And literally, this has been the strategy of the city every year, to not issue the permit until almost the last day, forcing me. I've done triple overnighters over the years to get an injunction ready in time, because the city actually is playing chicken with us every year, not really caring to engage on the issues. We've tried to engage on issues. In fact, we have paid the Parks Department a fee for cleaning up the parks every year, and it only came to
how much is that fee?
$2,200, and multiple years, the city never bothered to cash it, mostly because they didn't like doing business with Masscan. Indeed, when the Boys and Girls Club we were told we had to use them as vendors, we did, and we used them as vendors until Masscan put out a wonderful flyer saying Masscan supports the Boys and Girls Club. And the Boys and Girls Club wouldn't let us do it anymore because they didn't want their name associated with Masscan. So we've worked with the city over the years all the time.
Thank you, Councilor, and that's all the questions I have for right now. The only thing I would ask going forward, and anyone in the audience, when my residents and my constituents testify, you need to behave yourself, you need to be a gentleman, and you have to change your tone. And you have to be more respectful to people. Thank you.
I've not hissed at anyone this entire time.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. We've also been joined by District 1 City Councillor Lydia Edwards. Welcome, Councillor Edwards. And at-large City Councillor Nisa Sabi-George. Welcome, Councillor Sabi-George. Councillor Zakhem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liz, thank you for the presentation and for the work you and the Friends do year-round for the parks. It's certainly a partnership with the city, and I'm excited to work with Commissioner Cook and his department and others in your agency to implement that new capital plan and master plan for the Common. It truly is a treasure for the city and the country. And I would like to say to John that coming in here, guns blazing, casting insults is not constructive when, after all of that, you agreed and offered to reduce this festival by 1 day, which is a very conciliatory approach, which is something that is the kind of discussion we're trying to have in this room, not lobbing insults, not flailing about and yelling about things. This is progress already that we have made in this hearing, which was my intent, and I believe Councillor Flynn's intent by bringing it. So I appreciate that your clients are willing to talk about that, and we need to have that discussion with the Parks Department, with those city agencies, and if it needs to happen more in advance, that's good. This is constructive information that we're getting instead of what happened in your opening statement. So maybe next time take a different approach. You're obviously successful litigating in court. This is not a court of law. We're trying to come to an agreement here. We're trying to figure out a way, as I said when I introduced this hearing, as we've said every step of the way, to respect First Amendment rights while also respecting the use of our parks, of our Common, of following these rules. So I have just a couple questions, and hopefully we can keep it civil this round. However, if you insist on making personal attacks again, it's not going to go that way. Number one, my question is there an objection to using City Hall Plaza?
Yes.
Okay. Is that related to what? Is it because of Boston Common?
Okay. Boston Common is the place, and frankly, I'm sorry, and part of, and I'll be conciliatory here in my presentation, I'm sorry that actually some and maybe even a lot of what the people that come in support of mass can and in support of free legal marijuana come to the Boston Common for is in your face, is in your constituents' face, in your constituents' faces. It is free speech isn't always pretty.
Sure.
And in fact, I don't control, they don't control the people that come to the rally. I have historically, when your kids, other people's kids have been arrested, and there were over 100 arrests one year. When kids are arrested, the head of MassCan and I, at the end of every rally, would go to every police precinct in Boston and make sure there wasn't some kid who didn't have 25 bucks and then later 40 bucks to get out and was spending the night in jail. Couldn't tell their parents, whatever. We did that. We take pride in what we do, but we don't own the people that come.
Sure.
And in fact, civil disobedience is a well-hallowed tradition as well in this country and on Boston Common.
Absolutely.
And there will not. You won't be able to find anybody on MassCan saying they're going to try and stop that, because they're not. And the reality is that even if there are laws and regulations that everyone wants to have in place to stop public smoking of marijuana, the reality is if people want to be civilly disobedient, they will be. And it's not, MassCan is not responsible for that happening. Frankly, I'm as a civil libertarian, I believe in civil disobedience. I think it's an American tradition. And frankly, I'm not going to discourage that. Now, when the City of Boston Police Department said that MassCan couldn't advocate smoking marijuana or possessing marijuana, and in fact, that was one of the lawsuits that we had to file, because that was the reason why the city denied a permit one year, was because they said in court that MassCan was inciting imminent lawless activity. I got up on stage that year and I said every manner of smoke pot, Mayor Menino, get high, City of Boston, inhale, Bill Clinton. I did all of those things and then offered myself up to arrest in the corner to make sure that the people that did take the stage after me were not afraid to speak the truth, speak truth to power under fear of being arrested. So that's that you won't find us agreeing ever to try and control what people do in terms of smoking on the common. That's going to happen, and that's not MassCan's fault.
So the answer, so I understand that. So the answer, though, is that it's the history, the principle of being on Boston Common.
Yes.
Is that okay? That is good to know. No, moving forward, and again, I will mention this again. I appreciate the willingness to talk about the duration of this. I think respecting the fact, and to clarify earlier, I don't think any of my colleagues intended to say there are not people who still oppose legalization of marijuana. I think that much is clear. But what is the policy now of the City of Boston, the law in the Commonwealth, is we are moving, albeit very slowly, to a regulated adult use cannabis industry here. And so clearly the environment has changed, the political, the legal environment, and that doesn't change the fact that people have a First Amendment right to protest, to march, to rally. This body's been out there. I know Councillor Flynn, myself, and I think probably all of our colleagues have stood with the hotel and restaurant workers of Unite Here Local 26 as they are marching, as we do get complaints from our constituents about noise, about disturbances for the last, is it 6 weeks now? Something like that? Yeah. 6 or 7 weeks. That's an important thing here. We have been trying to get at is finding an accommodation here for folks to exercise those First Amendment rights, to enjoy what is clearly a popular festival, while also dealing with a lot of the folks who are here and a lot of people who aren't here, who, whether it's noise, whether it's the trash cleanup, and it sounds like there's a willingness to discuss more mitigation around trash. These are important things. I mean, this is the goal of this, and I'll just reiterate that. That's the tone we need to be taking in here, and I appreciate that. Right now, I think that's all I have. I know we have a lot of folks who want to speak after this, and I know my colleagues probably have some things to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Zakem. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Liz, thanks for being here and all the things you do. We got to meet each other during the whole Winthrop Square thing, and we ended up on the wrong side of that team, but I know that as that goes forward, you're going to be working hand in hand with Chris and everybody in the Parks Department to make sure that that money's spent well. and I appreciate that. Your integrity is not questioned. My question to you, John, you said a couple times, you know, can you meaningfully respond to blah, blah, blah. What is MassCan's mission?
To promote the legalization of marijuana. That's to the best of my abilities, understanding that.
So it's legal. So now what's
it's not legal yet. It is legal in some respects. There are regulatory.
So now what's the mission?
To promote the legalization
So I voted no.
marijuana.
I voted no, for the record. I'm that guy.
Okay.
But I'm also working with 5 or 6 marijuana companies right now that want to come into District 5. When you fight for something, you fight, you lose, you win, you move on, right? I've moved on. I went to Colorado. I did my due diligence. I visited the stores. I visited the growers. I met the police. I met the health and hospitals. I met the teachers. I met everybody in a 4-day whirlwind tour of Denver, and I came out with some different thoughts. And I think I can positively use those to positively affect whoever comes into my neighborhood with cannabis. Having stated all of that, I still don't get the heart of a rally. A rally is for, the mission of any rally is to get some type of success or some type of action. That action's already been taken care of. Also, within, okay, you can keep shaking your head, but it's flipping legal in Massachusetts, right? Okay? So, having said that, I don't understand why, if we're going to talk about legality of marijuana or not legality of marijuana, why MassCan and anybody else feels that they can smoke pot, even though it's illegal to smoke anything on the common. And I would tell you this, that if the tobacco industry came in and knocked on Chris Cook's door and said, hey, Chief, we're going to protest the fact that we can't smoke in restaurants and parks anymore, we're going to have a cigarette fest on the common, I would find it hard to believe that most people would be like, that's a great idea. I don't think that would happen. So I don't understand the mission. Like, so you've accomplished your mission. Mission accomplished. Now, you know, just go away. It's over.
I can't help the tobacco industry. I'm not trying to help the tobacco industry.
It was anecdotally saying.
Okay, well, then let me give you another anecdote.
Okay.
Women's right to suffrage. Have women achieved all the rights equal to men in terms of voting and voting rights and ability to be representative and represented in this democracy? I would probably say no.
Really?
Yeah, I would.
Really? I just saw my colleague Ayanna Pressley just go right up the ladder. She's in the Capitol right now.
And how long did that take?
Good things take time, and you know what?
No kidding.
Yeah.
And good things take time.
And you took time, and now you've got it's legal, and now you're here.
I see. Historically, you're saying now, oh, we've achieved everything we need. Women have achieved
that's just a stupid statement. That's just a dumb statement.
No,
it is.
Your proposition.
It's a dumb statement.
I don't want to say your proposition.
Obviously, we haven't
because
accomplished
I've been told not
everything.
to do that.
Okay.
But you told me my proposition is dumb.
Obviously, we haven't accomplished everything, right? So don't go into this giant hypothetical. I'm saying that what you've done is you've succeeded. MassCan and number 2 have passed, right? They've passed. That's fact. Whether or not it's completely open and passed to your capacity or how big you want it, regardless, right? You've succeeded. But as you've succeeded, they're doing explicitly illegal things on the common. They're going against their permit, and in every other permit throughout the entire city, whether it's a street closing for a block party or whatever, there's rules and regulations. And when they're violated, the permits are pulled. Why do you think that you're above that?
I am not, and MassCan is not.
They are.
MassCan is not the ones that are doing the smoking on the common.
So what?
That is the rest of the people that come and attend. In fact, frankly, I remember
so it's not a
I would search the head of MassCan at the beginning of every rally to make sure he wasn't carrying anything.
You're like the greatest guy ever. You pick up things. You got a flock going. You're a lawyer. You're the greatest. I mean, you're the best. I should just simmer down because you clearly have it all taken care of. It's unbelievable.
I do the best I can.
It's unbelievable that you think that MassCan is not responsible for the people who are smoking pot out there.
Would you ask me if I think there is a causal link or a correlation between what MassCan says on stage and what people do?
No,
and
I'm not going to ask you that question.
Smoke?
I'm not going to ask you that question because you have a smarmy answer. So there you go.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Edwards.
Good afternoon. I came in the middle of, I think, what was a contentious conversation, and I don't intend to really add to that tone. Unlike my colleague, I voted to legalize it. I voted to legalize it because I felt that there were, our criminal justice system had targeted black and brown specific folks through the war on drugs, and as a result, I felt that it made no sense for us to continue that system through what was an arbitrary regulation of marijuana when compared to other drugs and other entities, or tobacco, alcohol. I would say alcohol has the highest body count of any use. I represent the North End, Charlestown, and East Boston, and in that is the Greenway, for example. And I'm bringing up this example. I represent a lot of parks, and the uses of those parks is a social justice issue for me, having access to them. I have one of the highest income inequalities in my district, with the largest housing project in Bunker Hill, deeply affordable units across the street from $1 million homes. We're fighting for open space that is accessible by all, regardless of their class. So the city of Boston, and I haven't been a city councilor very, very long. I was a community organizer before that, a legal services attorney before that. The city of Boston, it's a new job as a city councilor, and balancing many interests is our job. And so I think to be conscious of that balance that we are trying to strike and come up with a solution is the goal of this hearing. I don't doubt that for many folks who voted to legalize this, to finally have the freedom to just walk into a store and go buy what they need to buy, to go smoke what they want to smoke on their own free time, that in their mind, the way the regulatory process is going, in no way, shape, or form do they feel that it is legal or that they're being treated as adults. I would argue, no. I would agree that the regulatory and the bureaucracy needs some massive improvement. What we are finding is those who are able to get the licenses and start the process are usually corporate entities, ironically, many of them having a lot more money than the black and brown young men who are serving or had served jail sentences for using the same thing. I say that to say, despite my viewpoint, my perspective, the balance and my understanding coming from legal services, I still even struggle with that, the legalization and where it's going to happen in my district. And I put that out there, my own vulnerability or my own back and forth about it, so that I think I represent a lot of people who are in that gray area. And so when I came into this conversation, to the tone that I was hearing, it made me less inclined to listen. It made me less inclined to listen to my gut and my social justice and understanding of why I voted for it, because it seems so contentious about things that we talk about all the time, whether the permit was applied for, whether the person who got it actually complied with the standards in the permit, and if they didn't, how they will comply in the future. And I think that that is the conversation. It's very basic. It's what we do all the time with the parks that we have. I have folks all the time wanting to do events on parks. I represent East Boston, for example. We have one of the largest parks there as a mitigation for the airport. What happens there and on and on. These are conversations that are actually pretty normal. It just happens to involve marijuana. And I do think this is a matter of time where one day getting a check from MCAN will not be seen as a pariah for the Boys and Girls Club. We're not there yet. So this is what I think we should be talking about, and I hope that the conversation will be drilled down to it. What are the standards of a permit for an event, Boston Common? Were those standards met by the event that AmCan, I'm assuming you were the permittee, you applied for the permit?
I'm the lawyer
I'm sorry,
for them.
did the organization apply for the permit?
Yes, they've
Okay.
applied for it.
When MCAN applied for those standards and said that they would meet those standards, the question for this hearing is, did you? I would not let MCAN as an organization, nor would I let the Boys and Girls Club as an organization say, I hosted an event, it's not my fault what my invitees did at the event. I wouldn't. Boys and Girls Club, St. Anthony's Church, whoever applies to meet certain standards, applies to meet those standards for the event that you have, where you invite folks to come to them. I think that's it. That's how permits work. Probably very true. It will be very hard to meet those standards when the advocacy of the organization is about the legalization and use, all types of use, smoking, eating, whatever, of marijuana, to say, therefore, stop all smoking during your event. But that's a burden and headache that your organization has. I'm not finished. And nor am I really posing a question. I think I'm testifying, so, to my thoughts. The same burdens that other organizations have as well. If the Boys and Girls Club applies for a permit and the rules are there's no smoking and drinking in that use of their permit, then that's the burden that they have for their event. It's just the burdens that are shared. And by the way, we have managed to come up with ways to allow for people to drink on and make money selling alcohol on our public parks. So it's not beyond our creativity to figure this out. We have beer gardens on the Boston Greenway. So we've gone there and had this conversation. And I think we can be creative and have that conversation again. If it's not realistic for an event to happen about marijuana, and I'm not saying that, but if it's not a realistic goal to then say no smoking can happen, then just like we have a beer garden where we have also rules that there's no drinking right on the parks, but we provided a way and permit for them to host a beer garden. It's fenced off. They have a way to monitor who gets the alcohol, where they can drink it. They do all of those things right now. City of Boston, with all its bureaucracy, managed to figure that out. So I think this conversation could be how we as the City of Boston and the community and all uses can figure this out. Is there a place location where a person applying for a permit would like to figure out how to access, smoke, or use marijuana within a confined space or area, checking and assuring that children don't have access to it, the same way the beer garden managed to figure it out. I don't feel like I'm saying anything that's contentious. I don't feel like I'm saying anything that's controversial. I think I'm just treating this conversation as a rational adult.
I agree that you are.
And so, don't help me. And so, I think I'd like that conversation to continue in that vein of what can we do, not what we're opposed to, and acknowledge again. I don't sit here with a black and white view of marijuana. I don't use it. I don't care if you use it though. I kind of don't want it right behind my house, but there's someone applying to have a dispensary behind my house. I'm being totally honest and expecting the judgment that comes from it, so whatever, let it come. But that's the struggle that most of us are having, and it does not help to not be adult about it and to not acknowledge that we have processes set up, standards to meet, regardless of who you are, and they should be met. And if they're not, there are repercussions or there are concerns about how to help to meet them, right? So, neutrally, permit was applied for, organization got it, last minute. We don't allow smoking in the parks. Smoking did happen. There were implications, or there are people who were impacted by the violation of the permit and then the trash and whatever issues. So we're here, going forward. How do we potentially design a permit that works, that allows for some sort of limited use? Or how will you rise to the occasion of the next permit you apply for and follow the rules?
Can I say one thing about that?
1 second. And I say this is not directed at you. This is directed to those folks who I think are listening, hopefully, and those folks who I hope are listening as well. And them behind me, I'm sure. But the point is that this conversation is about how we get someplace together and should be, based on standards that are set in a permit. And the organizations that apply for that permit need to meet the standards. That's it. I'm done.
Could I say something in response briefly?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. If there's no question, if you would like to allow the gentleman to respond, you
I
may,
have
but
no
if there's
question.
no question, then thank you.
Could I say something, though?
We're going to follow the questions. You'll have an opportunity for a brief closing statement. Councillor Asabi George.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the co-sponsors who put together today, obviously with your leadership. I'm curious about, and these questions, I apologize for being late. These questions may have been answered prior to my arrival, but so much has happened since I've walked in the room. How many vendors participate in the weekend?
I don't know.
Where do the vendors, how do the vendors appear on the common?
There is a long-established plan set out in advance where the City of Boston has a meeting with us, with MassCan. There's a vendor layout plan organized with the Boston Police Department, and then there's a walkabout where we walk the common in advance of every rally and talk about where all of the vendors are going to be positioned. The vendor plan and the placement of the vendors has always been approved in advance. It's never been dealt with ad hoc on the day of, except when the city police put a barricade around and put half of the vendors outside of the barricade when they put it around. That year, then there was a lot of ad hoc movement. But other than
So that didn't happen this past year?
No, that did not happen this past
So this past year, how many vendor booths were set up?
I'm sorry, I'm the lawyer. I'm not the event organizer, nor do I have the plans of
You don't have access to those vendor plans?
There are people that are here that could answer those questions. They're here.
Is there a charge for the application to be a vendor as a part of this day?
The vendors, and I don't want to be quoted on this, but it's my understanding they pay some sort of a fee for the booth.
And what's the general fee structure, loosely? Is it $25? I've done craft fairs where it's $25 for a table. Is it $100? Is it $500? Is it $1,000 for a booth?
I have no idea.
None whatsoever?
None.
Do you, as a part of the 503 status of MassCan, do you have to file any of their end-of-year financial statements?
I'm not a member of MassCan. I am their ACLU appointed lawyer. I
understand that. I understand that. But do you file any of their end-of-year reports with the state?
I deal with their freedom of speech issues. I don't deal with their 501c3 status. I don't have anything to do with that.
Do you know how many individuals may be representing vendors that are at the rally? So you may be representing their interests as well as an extension of MassCan on whether or not they're able to sell a certain product.
No, and I don't have anything to do with vendors of any kind.
You have no relationship with the vendor process or what's for sale?
No, but I do know that they're not allowed to sell anything illegal.
And so what are they allowed to sell?
I don't know, but not marijuana.
And what else are they allowed not to sell?
The things that are illegal.
So what are they allowed to sell? Coke,
things that are
Coca-Cola,
illegal. You know, when I would bring my children to the rallies in the early days, it was because they had these fabulous gauzy dresses with stars and things exploding on them, and my girls loved them. And so I'd take them in strollers, and we'd pick out clothes for them to wear.
So
it's a kid-friendly event, actually.
Right. So some of the vendors may sell clothing, T-shirts, branded merchandise, whether it's for MassCan or another organization.
I've actually seen the people now hawking Keurig things that you can put little Keurig containers in and get a particular dosage of whatever you want. So there's high-tech people now. There are people that are getting into the business of selling marijuana related products.
And so what else have you seen? Dresses, Keurig product type things?
Well, then there's the educational
T-shirts.
village. There's a village where MassCan puts on an educational forum. There are presentations. I've been on several of the panels.
And what are those presentations about?
About the history of legalization, about the fight for legalization,
Okay.
about various aspects of growing marijuana. And there were a bunch of marijuana growers. The last one that I went to was a year and a half ago, or the one before this one. And they were all talking about the different ways of achieving higher potency in growing and things like that.
I would just
Sounds
interject
usual.
at this moment. Please make sure you're speaking into the microphone. We've heard from our tech people.
Sure,
It's hard
thank
to hear
you.
some of the sound.
Have there been instances in the past where vendors have sold or been selling inappropriate product?
I have not seen any with my own eyes. I have heard of that in the last, at this last rally, and I have heard people telling them to shut it down, so.
So how many vendors were shut
I don't
down
know.
for selling inappropriate
I don't know.
product?
There were also vendors that were putting their own music out, blasting their
Yeah.
own little music, and they were shut down too.
Great.
People that are not supposed to do what they're not supposed to do, there are organizers that go around and tell them not to do it.
But what, as your representative, as their lawyer, representing them regarding their freedom of speech, do you play a role in advising on what should be or could be or can't be shut down?
I don't play that role, but I am quite confident that the management of MassCan knows full well what the law is with respect to legal and illegal products.
And then I received some complaints because of my interest in the opioid crisis and improperly disposed needles across our city, which we've collected hundreds of thousands of improperly discarded sharps, that there was a significant increase in the number of sharps left behind after this last event.
I can only say I find that to be a little bit incredulous, because marijuana users, smokers, and people that are MassCan members aren't heroin users. And needles are really not a way of ingesting marijuana at all. And so if there are needles there, and there are heroin users that come to the Common, and I know there are, because I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I do court-appointed work in Suffolk Superior Court, and I historically have done it in the Boston Municipal Court, Roxbury, and Dorchester. So I'm completely familiar with illegal street drug use. And I, as part of that knowledge, thought it was part of my job to see that marijuana was not continued to be part of that, because it doesn't belong in the same category as those drugs. And the people that are using opioids, frankly, if they were using marijuana, they would probably use less opioids. And in fact, that's been pretty well documented.
So is that part of any of the educational, or perhaps some vendors there to talk about, you know, marijuana as a form of accessing pain relief as opposed to opioids?
There are members, many members of MassCan that use marijuana as an alternative to pain relief with stronger or more addictive drugs.
And, you know, so back to the needle question, though, because that was a significant concern that we received calls about. I understand that it wasn't a heroin event, but could there have been an increase in intravenous drug use during this weekend's event?
I see no real scientific basis for there being any causal link or correlation between that. Whether or not maybe some heroin users decided that it was a good day to come to the Common and listen to music and shoot up, I don't know. They're not part of MassCan,
but you can't tell me who the vendors were and what the products were that the vendors were selling. So how could you say that there was no causal connection between increased numbers of needles found on the Common and this event?
Well, I have been to almost all of the rallies over the years.
So please tell me about some of the other vendors that you saw.
There's no one selling heroin. There's no one selling needles. There's no one. I've never seen heroin use on the Boston Common during a rally. I have seen heroin use walking through the Boston Common at other times, but that has nothing to do with MassCan. It has nothing to do with the rally. And I got to tell you that these people, whom I do represent in many capacities in court, really don't like being tarred and feathered with needles. It has nothing, literally nothing, to do with marijuana legalization, marijuana use. Nothing.
I'm all set.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sabi. George, I really want to get to the public testimony, so I will keep my questions really as brief as possible with a caveat that this is more of a statement. I think that sort of despite a lot of the raw emotion that may be in the room right now, there is a real desire to recognize the fact that there have been issues really exacerbated this year and find some common ground. And I think the fact that there seems to be a desire to decrease the number of days, as Councillor Zakhem had mentioned, is a very positive sign. There seems to be more daylight between folks on whether or not it could be moved to here or an alternative venue. But I do hope that this hearing, if nothing else, allows folks to listen to one another and to really try to find ways that we can address the myriad concerns that have been brought up and that we've heard since the Freedom Rally this past September. So that's all I have, unless my colleagues have any further questions before we get to public testimony. I would allow both of you to give a brief, please, a 1-minute closing statement. John, I told you could address it, a series of questions earlier, so just any concluding remarks. We'll start with you, John, and then go to you, Liz. Please keep it at 1 minute. And please get close to the mic so we can hear you.
I do want to take up some of the things that Councillor Edwards had mentioned, and I totally agree that this is where the rubber still needs to meet the road. We can't do what a beer garden can do in Boston. The laws don't permit it. In fact, the laws still don't permit social consumption outside in any place or social consumption in clubs. And that falls, and in public housing, you can't use marijuana because of public housing rules. So the illegality of marijuana still falls disproportionately on minorities and people in underserved communities and people that have no money. And they can't do those things. To suggest that we can't either. There's still no provision in the law for public consumption outside or in a social club or a cigar bar-like situation. It doesn't exist. So to say that MassCan now becomes responsible for what their attendees have literally always done, which is smoke marijuana, they can't be held responsible, and I don't think legally they would be held responsible. In fact, historically, I have sued for precisely that issue, and so I'm not of the view that stopping smoking is MassCan's job or responsibility. I think that issue has been settled and is not MassCan's responsibility. I do think, however, I would love to engage everyone in making this fairer for everyone in Massachusetts and doing things that expand the laws in ways that make it fairer. And we still got a lot of work to do, which means there still needs to be a rally.
Thank you. Ms. Visa, did you have any
Yeah, so I've been in this gallery many times waiting to testify, so I'm going to be very brief, and I'll say what I said before. It's not about free speech. It is not about marijuana. Is it about the flouting the permit? It is about the unacceptable disruption that occurs in the park. It is about the amount of damage and trash that's left, all of the aspects of the permit that are not abided by year after year. So we look forward to finding an acceptable solution that moves from the current condition to something in the future and it's not that we're just speaking for 55,000 residents that live around the park. We're speaking for the millions of people that come to this park and want to be able to use it and use it as a clean, safe, free place for their purposes. So we look forward to seeing where we can go from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. We will now, you're dismissed. We will now begin public testimony. I have 4 sheets here. 27 people have indicated that they would like to offer public testimony. I'm going to ask every person to limit it to 2 minutes. Again, please no applause. Use spirit fingers if need be. I'm going to read the first 3. You can line up to these 2 podiums to my left and right. And if you didn't sign in or you didn't click X, I will not check off the yes box. I will not read your mind, but we will take you after we've gotten through everyone who's indicated that they would like to testify. Oh, sure. Sorry, Councillor Edwards.
I just wanted to note that those folks who still believe there's equity work to be had in this industry, in this conversation, that Councillor Kim Janey and Councillor Presley have called for a hearing to do just that, and to speak about equity within this the emerging industry, and to make sure, actually. So we're actually spearheading that conversation. I know we don't get credit for that, but to maybe some of your surprises, we are trying our best to make sure that in as much as the industry is going to grow, it should grow in an equitable way that's accessible. So I'm putting that out there. I just tried to check my phone, and I'll text Councillor Janey when I get the date and time if it's been set. But we are, I'm sorry? Thank you very much. December 4th, there will be the conversation, and we hope to have, the head of the commission, Alexis Finner, in here to really talk about the bureaucracy and how we might be setting ourselves up for further inequity in Boston. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Our first 3 folks to testify, Nicole Snow, Michael Latulipe, and Bill Callender. Could please stand up at these 2. I'd also, and I apologize if I mispronounce any names, please say your name, your organization, and your neighborhood or city, if not Boston. I'm sorry, where the laptop is, you can just adjust that, and then the other one you guys can switch off. So Nicole, Michael, and then Bill.
Hello.
So, hi.
I'm Nicole Snow. I am the president of the Massachusetts Patient Advocacy Alliance, so I am here representing my organization outside of MassCan. However, I am a director on MassCan as of this year. I did attend the Boston Freedom Rally this year, and I was a part of the organization body. That was new to me this year, although in the past I have attended other rallies, although I've not been a part of the intricate planning of it. But I did want to point out that my organization did benefit from the Boston Freedom Rally in years past, in 2011 and 2012, and years after, we received a free booth. And the Massachusetts Patient Advocacy Alliance was the group that spearheaded the medical marijuana ballot initiative. Our organization would not have met the patients that have advocated for medical marijuana in this state if it wasn't for the Boston Freedom Rally. The Freedom Rally has grown since legalization. There are regulatory questions that we all have on how to monitor, plan, and implement the rally, and therefore advocate for marijuana regulations and the concerns around it. Now, I represent patients with disabilities that use marijuana for medical purposes, that carry cards. So the concerns that come to me are relative to accessibility, whether or not they have access to facilities, whether or not their anxiety when coming to the common will be controlled. So this year's setup was a little different, and I think that they were trying to show that they could create a 21+ area. A lot of patients did come to me and tell me that it was a very relaxing area to be in, that it was beneficial to their health. I also had feedback from veterans that are patients from my organization that took part in the camping site that they had, because they're not that they were the organization that created it, but that they were respected and cared for, and that they took part in something that they could learn from and take home with them. So MassCan Normal is an education political advocacy group We do have regulations that we need to work out at the state level. I'm also an advisor to the Cannabis Control Commission, so I'm very aware of some of the things. But I do want to see Councillor Edwards' suggestion that we work towards a final agreement on how these things are worked out, because I did see a lot of respect given to the patients and the people around the park that needed to get in and out, and I hope that continues. I know that we would not have medical marijuana legalization here if it wasn't for MassCare Normal. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Michael is next, followed by Bill Callender, followed by Barbara Moore. Michael?
Hey, hello. My name is Michael LaTulip. I reside at 190 Bridge Street in Salem. I'm a member of the Cannabis Advisory Board to the Cannabis Control Commission, where I focus on medical marijuana patient-related issues. I'm also a certified economic empowerment priority applicant. I agree with the councilor from East Boston that the city should come out with processes and standards for marijuana events like the Freedom Rally instead of prohibiting the event. Perhaps also limiting the event to 2 days would be appropriate, but I would allow the neighborhood organizations to work it out with MassCan and the city to effectively regulate events like this, included in an area where smoking could be permitted. The tone of this hearing has been off from the beginning, and it was disheartening for me and other advocates to learn that the mission of MassCan is some kind of joke to certain city officials, and that the Freedom Rally is no longer needed because marijuana is legalized. That certainly set the stage for what we saw on display here today and why this meeting was so contentious. How do we expect a civil conversation when at the outset of this meeting, the mission of the organization in question was turned into a joke by some of the very councilors speaking here today? The councilor representing Mattapan here today should understand why his constituents still attend the Freedom Rally and why it is so important to them. It is still important because of how the war on marijuana has ruined the lives and families of the residents of Mattapan, Roslindale, and other communities around Boston. And those families are still being negatively impacted to this day, even after legalization. Laughing about it is absolutely unacceptable. The city of Boston should immediately rearrange their priorities to focus on helping individuals harmed by the war on drugs, and should no longer focus on how to impede the First Amendment and an annual event that poses little to no problems in terms of violence and criminal activity. The city has absolutely no good plan for equity and economic empowerment applicants, so why is this the main focus? The simple solution here is to develop a system similar to beer gardens, where consumers can use marijuana openly in designated areas. Please do not prohibit this event, but instead come up with real solutions.
Thank you, Michael. Bill Callender is next, followed by Barbara Moore, and then Samson Rasiopi. And again, if you could say your name, your organization, if you have it, in your neighborhood or city. Thank you.
You were first? I'm first.
I think you were
Are you,
first.
are you Bill?
I'm Samson.
All right, so and you're
I am.
Moore, you, Barbara, and then Samson. Bill Callender may have left early. Okay, so thank you. Barbara, you're up.
Hello, everybody. I'm probably about twice the age of everybody in this room. I'm a long-time taxpayer to the city of Boston. I am a representative here today of the Friends of the Public Garden, and my real interest is the horticulture and of that particular piece of ground. And there's just too much distress for this kind of an organization to be there, and it really needs a new home. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Barbara. Samson?
Good afternoon. 2 minutes is very short, and I have a lot of stuff to say, so I'll be very brief. My name is Samson Rachapi. I go to school at Suffolk University. I walk on the Boston Common nearly every day of the week, because it's a great place. It's beautiful. I like to walk. On any given day, you will see homeless people. You will see people using drugs. I don't want to say this because I accept it. It's something that we deal with as a society, and it's something that's happening every day. I want to go back to, I know that we're talking about 2018. I'd like to talk about 1996, which was the first freedom rally I attended as a 14-year-old. And now, 14 years old at a cannabis rally, that sounds a little messed up, right? But as a 14-year-old, I was going down a path of addiction. It runs in my family. I was drinking to get drunk at 14 years old. And I went to the freedom rally here in the Boston Common because I heard about it. You know, it's a big deal. People go out into this common space, and they do something that's really stigmatized in a public area as an act of civil disobedience. And as a teenager, that was really appealing to me. And so my first time at the Freedom Rally, I knew criminalization was bad, but I didn't realize how destructive our policies were to people in society. It was honestly the trash at the end of the rally when I saw volunteers going around and handing out bags and encouraging participants to pick up trash. And I saw the indifference in a lot of participants as they were walking away from the rally that day, that I knew I had to get involved. And I went up to one of those volunteers, I grabbed the bag, and I started picking up trash. And the rest of that night, I volunteered with MassCan. I helped them break down the stages, I helped them pick up trash, and I helped them get out of there. And unfortunately, at the conclusion, it was still a little trashed. It wasn't perfect, but that taste of activism that day has continued with me over 20 years to today. When I hear people say that this isn't free speech, it is very much free speech. That's what I participate in. I don't go there to smoke cannabis in an open setting. I go there to advocate on behalf of people who need to be advocated for. There's still a lot of need in society there's people who are still sitting behind jail because of cannabis. There are people who have records that can't get jobs because of cannabis. To say that there is no need for activism in this space is inaccurate. And I've already gone beyond my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I have some testimony here. I don't know where to put it.
If you can leave it to the left of that podium on the concrete slab, and we will make sure that every councilor receives it. Thank you for that, Sampson. Up next, we have Eve Waterfall, followed by Leslie Adam and Liz Lempres. Eve, Leslie, and Liz.
Hi. Let me start by saying that I have no documentary evidence for what I'm about to say. However, I do want to offer my own eyewitness account to this hearing.
Sorry, you are Eve Waterfall?
I am Eve Waterfall.
Okay, thank you. Are you your town or your neighborhood?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
I also want to note that while I, too, am an attorney and a big fan of the First Amendment, I'm also in favor of enforcing the city permits and the law. So I will get into my actual testimony. My name is Eve Waterfall, and I happen to be chair of the board of the Beacon Hill Civic Association. That's not why I'm here today. Today, I would like to speak as a resident of Beacon Hill, as a parent, and as an athletic coach. In the 20-plus years that I've lived on Beacon Hill, I've watched this event grow from the one-day political rally into this 3-day commercial festival. For those of us in the neighborhood, we know that during this festival, the Common is going to be transformed from a welcoming place where kids play, residents exercise, workers bike and walk to work, dog owners can safely use the off-leash area, to a 3-day festival where unlicensed sales and use of marijuana and other drugs openly occur. We know that to avoid the park on the day before for the cars and the vendors driving into the park, and we avoid the park for a few days after to allow the Parks Department to do the hard work of picking up all the trash, food, and yes, needles that the event leaves behind. Dog owners sometimes wait longer for fear of their pets ingesting edibles. This year I walked through the event and saw numerous sales of presumably drugs. 2 women carried large Tupperware containers calling out, "Edibles, edibles." Public smoking of marijuana occurred throughout the Common and filtered out into the neighborhoods as festival goers returned to their cars, many of which I saw were from Rhode Island and New Hampshire, and drove off at the end of the day. At the end of the first day, there was such a distinct haze and smell above the Common that the neighborhood children getting off their school buses on Beacon Street referred to it as the city's annual back-to-school weed party. I also observed what appeared to be underage minors engaging in this behavior as well. There was a small police presence at the periphery of the Common, but I did not see them enter the Common itself or make any attempt to write citations for the numerous and flagrant violations of law that occurred on each of the 3 days of the festival that I attended. I found this hands-off approach, frankly, baffling, as I doubt I could host a 3-day keg party in the Common and hope to get away with it. There was also no attempt to protect minors from entering the event or buying or selling marijuana or edibles. As an athletic coach in a suburban school, I heard numerous stories of local and suburban teens attending the event and having easy access to marijuana and other drugs. This event, in its current form, is not good for our parks, our city, or our children, and I strongly urge the City Council and the Mayor to require that any event that takes place in our city comply with all laws and permits so that residents, visitors, and event goers are safe. Thank you for consideration of these comments.
Thank you very much, Eve. Leslie, Adam, Liz Lempers or Lamprey?
My name is Leslie Adam. I live in Beacon Hill. I am here as a resident. I am also a board member of the Friends of the Public Garden. I'm involved with the Friends because I'm a huge fan of green spaces. I was born in Roslindale and spent my youth in Franklin Park and many of those parks in that area. I remember the Boston Common of the 1970s. My mother and I would always go to the parks, but the Common was in some pretty rough shape. And I'm really proud of the private and public partnership that we have with the city to really make those world-class parks. But to do that is tricky, and there are things like permits. We work really hard with the city, and everyone needs to have access. We say it's not about free speech or about this event. What we're saying is it's just been growing and significantly growing. There are a number of voices that you will hear from today, but the most important thing is this event has grown to such a size. As I understand it, it's now the second largest event of its type in the United States. I think the photographs speak for themselves. It is a very big event. I believe it's outgrown the management. There have been growing problems, and we would just ask the city to consider looking at the permits and regulations that we do for every organization that comes to that park. As an aside, I'd like to thank you all. This has been a topic of discussion. No doubt you've heard about it from your constituents year over year, but you're taking the time to hear all of us and try to come to the right agreement for all of us for a successful and safe park is much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Liz Lempers or Lamprey? Laura Finley? Ben Starr? Andy Gauss? Okay. You are Ben?
I am.
Okay, so Ben, after Ben will be Andy Gauss and Ethan Vogt. Thank you. Hi, Ben, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, folks. I appreciate the councilors and the city administrators for being here and the opportunity to speak. I'm Ben Starr. For just about 20 years, I've lived at 49 Beacon Street. That's on the 5th floor, and I'm immediately opposite the Spruce Street entrance to the Boston Common. As a suburban kid, Framingham, maybe not the wrong side of the tracks, but I could hear the whistle blowing. But I dreamed of living in the city, and it's a privilege every day to feel like I'm the host to all those who congregate on the Common, all over the region, all over the world. I'm a YIMBY, except it's my front yard. To that end, I sat on the IAG in the Article 80 review for Winthrop Square, the shadow building, and I feel like I helped shepherd that process along to what I believe is a beneficial result for all the residents of Boston. My 6th grader jokes that we don't have a backyard, but we have an awesome front yard, and we want as many people to get a chance to use that yard as possible. And maybe not all my neighbors agree, but I've always felt the same way about the event formerly known as Hempfest. But something changed around the time that marijuana was legalized in Massachusetts. The attendance quickly amplified along with the number of vendors. In the prior focus, one of protest and music, good food, has quickly shifted to become an enormous, impassable pot party for high school and college kids, anchored by an impossibly large open-air market, blanketed by a haze of pot smoke that infests all of our homes, into our cars with windows up, and now it's 3 days and 2 nights. What did I see this year that stood out as I attempted to push my way across the Common? A density of people and businesses on the Common that did not allow for any other activities at all. No dog walking, no football tossing, no Freedom Trail walks, no play over around the Frog Pond Park. Not a chance. I wasn't around for the Pope's visit in 1978, but I've been around for endless corporate challenges, other road races, the Women's March, outside the box concerts, Shakespeare on the Common events, even for the Life is Good festival, maybe about 10 years ago, that left a football field of pumpkin shards. Yet there's nothing like this year's event. A haze of pot smoke that no child should have to be around. Vendors selling stickers out front, no ID required, front of their booths, that could be exchanged for edibles at the side of the booth. I have pictures for, I don't know where that attorney is, who challenged some of the statements we've made. It was easy. If any of you had attended or had a chance to attend, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. This isn't about legalization of marijuana. It's not about political speech. It's about an open-air shopping mall taking over the Common. I ran into inebriated high school-age children of my suburban friends with their "I smoke" stickers. I promise not to share their pictures today. I watched 2 ambulances at separate times have to drive the wrong way eastbound on Beacon Street into Boston because pedestrian traffic was unmanaged, causing backups in the normal eastbound lane. Here's a representative tweet that day. There's plenty of them if you go on Twitter and do a search. Young lady, the sweet smell of success, yay, legal weed. That smell hits you as soon as you step off Park Street, T-stop at Boston Common, people rolling up everywhere, rolling. And then there's a picture of a young man or someone rolling a joint.
Thank you.
This is about a shopping mall that takes over the Common, and it's about the lack of enforcement. And I regret that no one questioned the police department and their lack of enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Andy Gauss, Ethan Vogt, Pamela Baker, next.
Councillors Aiken and Flynn, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Today you've convened a hearing to consider whether the Boston Freedom Rally should perhaps be denied access to Boston Common.
I'm sorry, are you Andy or are you Ethan?
I'm Andy.
Okay,
Andy
sorry.
Gauss.
Thank you, Andy Gauss. Thank you.
You should instead be listing the many reasons why the Boston Freedom Rally is perfectly matched with the Boston Common. The Boston Common really is the Common property not just of Boston, but of Massachusetts and the world. On the days of the Boston Freedom Rally, our program of education and entertainment is offered free of charge to tens of thousands of visitors from all over Massachusetts and other states. Is there any other event where so many people share the Common so freely and so peacefully and without incident? And since the Common is richly provided with public transportation, most visitors come that way. In almost any other location that might be proposed, except perhaps City Hall Plaza, tens of thousands of visitors would mean thousands and thousands of cars. And the Boston Freedom Rally really is the Freedom Rally. It's not spreading the gospel of cannabis. It's about freedom from arrest, freedom to grow your garden, freedom to be secure in your home against invasive searches, and freedom from arbitrary firings and obstacles to employment. We haven't won, Councillor McCarthy. It's not as if marijuana is legal and there are no consequences for people. The federal laws are still in place. We still have work to do, thank you. MassCan Normal, the sponsoring organization for the party, has had to sue the city 6 times, which the city is apparently proud of. But there is a clear pattern of treating the rally with special prejudice, presumably because of what it advocates. No one suggests that the Red Sox victory parade should have avoided the downtown or that it generated too much trash. I sometimes have to avoid City Hall Plaza because the rock concerts there are so loud and I don't want to get close to them. I don't think it's even so terrible if there are a few days when some people don't use the Common as much because tens of thousands of people do want to enjoy it in a special way. We have already started on on measures to mitigate trash. We will require vendors to show their trash barrel before loading in. We're going to ask for deposits to be held against cleanups. And above all, we want to have a common walk-around with MassCan representatives, Friends of the Public Garden representatives, and Commissioner Cook and his representatives, and verify what condition the common really is in after the rally is finished. Because we have seen a lot of photographs floated about as if they were representative of what trash was left, when in fact they were taken during the rally. Basically, we welcome the stewardship of the Friends of the Public Garden and the concerns of people who live close, but they do not own the common so much that they should be allowed to say what happens, and they should not be allowed to cut off the rights of tens of thousands of visitors to assemble peacefully and enjoy life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Ethan Vokes next, followed by Pamela Baker and James Barondess, I believe. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. Okay, Ethan, Pamela, and James.
My name is Ethan Vogt. I'm a resident of Boston, District 7. I'm not a member of MassCan Normal, but I've participated in some wellness workshops and hosted some other things as part of the Freedom Rally. Activists are heroes, and these activists are heroes. And if you think about what this group, not myself, did for 30 years of nonviolent civil disobedience at great personal risk, I can't imagine being there when there were 100 cops there. And I've talked to doctors who have been threatened to lose their medical license because they were prescribing. And eventually they were vindicated in 2016 when the voters of this state passed the legalization law. So I'm not suggesting that we have a statue down at the Common, but I think it might be appropriate to have an annual event. That said, there's clearly growing pains here. This has gotten much bigger. The crowd is much more diverse. I brought my 70-year-old father for the first time to the rally this year, and he actually connected. He was served in Vietnam, and he actually connected with some of the veterans there, which was pretty wild to watch how communities build. So I think the city should really recognize that we have a potentially great event, a great city event here, and partner with MassCan Normal to make it as great as the city deserves. I could see the Cannabis Control Commission that has a mission about education to be involved and equity. I could see Department of Economic Empowerment being involved. There are lots of local and national brands that are coming in. There are lots of tourism that could happen here. And then finally, arts and cultural affairs. I mean, I think that we could better display the artwork and feature local artists. But honestly, my greatest hope is that this rally and that cannabis culture in general might actually heal the significant racial and economic divide of our city. And to do that, I see no better location than the Boston Common.
Thank you, Ethan. Pamela Baker, James Barondess, and Lauren Hoops Schmeig. Pamela, James, and Lauren.
Hi, I'm James Barondess.
Okay. Excuse me, no Pamela Baker? Okay. James, you are up. Thank you.
Hi. I've lived in the neighborhood for 30 years and have been following this the whole time. First, I just want to say thank you for having this hearing and involving the community in this. I think this is a long overdue thing, and it's great that we've done this, and I think it's important. A lot of the things I was going to mention have been gone over already. I would like to just strongly agree with the points Liz Vizza was making about the impact of this event on the park. And I think the event itself is a commendable thing, but I think at this point we've seen really overwhelming evidence that the size and the form of the event are better suited to some place other than the green space of the Common. Now, I think we've also seen that the way this event has asserted their legal rights over the years, they've been able to carve out a kind of special case exception for themselves in which their First Amendment rights seem to be more important than the First Amendment rights of all the other events that try to get permitted out there, of which there are many that are either declined or limited in some way. This is an event like any other out there. It's not special. It doesn't have any unique moral high ground that any other event that wants to be on the Common has. I think we need to keep sight of that. Having extra aggressive legal counsel doesn't make you a more special event than any other. And I think it's important for the city, the community, and the Parks Department to have a say in how our spaces are used. And I think this is a good step in that direction. And I think if we can have a more productive and civil dialogue with these guys, we can probably come to a good understanding. I think moving the event here to City Hall Plaza makes more sense for a lot of reasons, but that can be negotiated. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Lauren is next, followed by Kyle Moon and Brett Cogill. Lauren, please.
Thank you. My name is Lauren Hoop-Schmieg, and I am the Executive Director of Hill House. Hill House is an independent, nonprofit community center located on Mount Vernon Street, just a few blocks from the Common off of Charles Street. Hill House has been serving families of downtown Boston for more than 50 years. Hill House's mission is to cultivate a strong sense of community by providing recreational, service, and cultural programs to the families who wish to call downtown Boston their home. Hill House's tagline is, "Your backyard in the city," and we truly live by that motto. We run more than 100 programs each season, including dozens of athletic leagues and classes, such as the Little League that is housed on the Boston Common, and flag football, as well as a summer camp. And we also use the Boston Common and the Charles River Esplanade Association as program areas. We are essentially see those as our neighborhood's backyards, in addition to the other visitors and many other people who enjoy the Common. We permit the Common regularly for our athletics, and thousands of children wouldn't be able to enjoy critical, healthy exercise through sports and play without access to this wonderful resource. Hill House has raised funds and overseen the renovation of the baseball fields on the Common, and we are deeply committed to protecting and enhancing the park. It is well documented that thousands and thousands of Hill House children have benefited from the outdoor recreational opportunities the Common's beautiful landscape has hosted over the last 50-plus years. Hill House is not taking a position on the rights of this group to use the Common for the event, nor do we have a position on the politics of the legalization of marijuana. And we certainly are not speaking against the rights of free speech of the rally's organizers and attendees. Our concerns stem from the growth of the event and the impact it has had on the children's access to the Common that we serve. When the event was held primarily on the weekend, while our families have expressed concern to us of the event, it had not directly affected our organization or disrupted our programs. Now, with the growth of the event to include the Friday, we've had to cancel all the programs we run on the Common that weekend due to staff and parental concerns. We receive scores of emails and phone calls leading up to the event every year asking us what our plans are due to safety concerns. Our request is either the event is moved to another location so that it isn't so central and in such close proximity to the heavily residential area where our children play regularly, or, at the very least, that the event size is greatly reduced and limited in size and scope to minimize the disruption to our children's recreational opportunities, the impact and damage to the park's landscape, and the concern the event causes to the family we serve, our neighbors, our staff, and our volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Next is Kyle Moon, followed by Brett Cogill, and then Shannon Jones.
Yeah, I'm Kyle Moon. I'm a resident of Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm here today representing the Summit Lounge. So we're a private membership organization in Worcester that allows the on-site consumption of cannabis. I was tasked by MassCan to provide a consumption area in the Common. We set it up. We did have a commercial vehicle on the common during the designated load in and load out times. We were not instructed by any police or Parks to Services. We were instructed by MassCan, and I think that they did an excellent job with executing that. I would like to see more instruction by the police and the Parks Department, and I can speak from my own personal experience with the Freedom Rally. This was my first year attending the Freedom Rally. I'm not a cannabis user. I'm not a consumer. I believe in the free speech and the rights of the individual in the state of Massachusetts and inside the United States. I believe that this could have been executed better, and I believe on all the internal conversations that I've had with the MassCan Board of Directors that they are trying to mitigate these and are open to concerns from the community and from city officials. I believe that there is a lot of history here today with MassCan and with the Freedom Rally, and I would ask everyone here to look towards the future and not the past, to reconcile our differences and figure out how we can achieve the rally and the important significance it has to freedom of speech and the rights of the individual. Moving forward, I would like to see an open dialogue between the Friends of the Public Garden and MassCan. To my knowledge, there have been no formal complaints or formal accusations, provided evidence of those, and I would love to see them. Internet testimony and pictures don't count as formal evidence, you know, and I would love to have those concerns brought up to the Board of Directors and have them be able to be mitigated. Yes, so that would be, yes. Once again, so I'm provided a picture here. I don't know when it is. There's no date on it. There's no formal reference of any activity. So this is good, and I'm not discounting that this stuff may have happened. But I would like to see an open dialogue, not just finger pointing. And I would like to see reconciliation and how we can move forward as a community, not just as a cannabis community, but as a greater Boston community and a Massachusetts community. I'm not opposed to any opposition, and I'm not opposed to any on the other side. You know, I think it's a community that needs to come together. I mean, the rally's been there for 30 years. We've been challenged by the city numerous times. We've won every time in court. So how can we fix this together instead of pointing fingers and blame? That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Brett Cogill, Shannon Jones, Deb Pasquala. Sorry about that. Brett, Shannon, Deb.
Good afternoon. I just want to say thank you for having this meeting to kind of bring everybody together, especially MassCan and the Friends of the Gardens. I'm Brett Cogill. I own Greenleaf Magazine. I also own Greenleaf Concessions. I was the manager for the concessions for this Freedom Rally. And a lot of the things that I've been hearing regarding needles is so beyond crazy. Because we can right now take all four of you guys, go up to the common, and there'll be needles on the ground there because of the usage all over the place of the city.
Just to be clear, there's 4 of us guys and 2 of those
Oh,
women.
I'm sorry, I'm totally sorry, and two ladies, I'm very sorry. And I'm totally against heroin. I've lost cousins, my girlfriend's lost family members. I'm strictly a cannabis user. The Freedom Rally is always based on cannabis. It was always based on the freedom of cannabis, how we can use cannabis. And it ended up right in the Boston City because that's where it ended up almost 29 years ago. We love to keep it into this city. I love this city very much. I come from 8 generations of Cohasset, Mass. This Boston Common is just not this city's, it's the state of Massachusetts, and I come here on a weekly basis. I visit here all the time. I go to numerous events with my children all the time, and I totally understand the people living around this area, especially when 50,000 people show up regarding fighting the cannabis usage. But you got to remember, there was also a World Series parade going on. There was trash all over the place, and you can go still around. There's still trash around there. The Freedom Rally always brought trash in, but we cleaned it up. This year brought a lot more people, brought a lot more vendors, brought a lot more trash, and we will resolve that issue because I know how MassCan is. They do want to resolve this issue and bring the 30th year to the Boston City. I notice all the people living around the city that are here, but go around and talk to every business around here. The Freedom Rally is always held on the 3rd September, 3rd Saturday of every September. Now you go to every hotel, every restaurant, every business, they're all packed, they're all full. That's all tax money coming to this city. Everybody's coming to the city to come to the Boston Freedom Rally during that. And another thing, I work closely with the Boston Police during this rally. And let me tell you, they were there. The problem is, we had no issues. We had no arrests. We had no problems. We had no fights because There is never any issue during the cannabis events. And I've been to almost every one of them across the world. And I've been to numerous Red Sox games, World Series games, footballs, and there's always fights and concert fights. I've never seen anything at the rally. So please look at that. There's no violence. There's no history of violence at the rally. Now, if we have a couple things that we have to resolve, we need to resolve it, and we would love to resolve it with you people. Because the Freedom Rally is what it says. It says Boston Freedom Rally, and that's where it should be held. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Shannon Jones, Deb, and Virginia Colburn.
Hi, thank you so much for allowing us to take our public testimony. My name is Shannon Jones. I'm standing here not only as a board of director of MassCan, I'm also a volunteer, I'm also an attendee, and I think it's very important to note that I'm also a mother. And I know that a lot of people have mentioned, what about the kids? They're coming out of the park and stuff like that. As a parent, as a responsible parent, yes, I do consume cannabis, but my child's well-being is obviously at the top of the list, and I share everybody's sentiment with that. I think that a lesson that can be learned is teaching your children safe practices, teaching your children, educating them about the miseducation that has gone on for many, many years. Also bringing up as a mother, during the rally, one of the things that I was very vocal on, I've been vocal on since we planned it early January of next year, is the trash. I don't want stoners to be looked at as savages. There are very well-working, civilized people who work in this community and in this state and this whole country who consume cannabis. That doesn't mean that just because there's trash left that is solely left on that person who's consuming it in the park. It could be left by a slew of people, tourists. You don't know where that resonates from, but that is something that I did focus on while I was at the rally. I made announcements on this stage, and I personally picked up the trash as well. And I will stand here and say that I was not proud with how the comments looked. I'm not going to sit here and try to make excuses and say that everything went out the way that it was supposed to. There's a learning curve that we are trying to adjust to as the crowd does get bigger. There are companies that we are researching to find out if we can have recycling centers. There are advocacy groups that are also willing to team up with us to make sure that the trash is kept to a minimum. In regards to the smoking, I can go smoke in the Commons right now, and I probably most likely will. That is up to whoever is there. No, it's true. To have it to focus on those 3 days and to balloon it and say that now all these heroin users are coming out and they're just deciding to use heroin during those 3 days, that is a little misleading. And I think that that should also focus on the epidemic that we have with the opiate crisis, that it doesn't just stop on 3 days. I mean, it doesn't just happen on 3 days. And cannabis is actually an exit drug to opioids, where if somebody is using heroin, they actually probably will stop using it if they focus on the medical pieces of it. So I would also like to open conversations with the Friends of the Garden, because I want to help with the cleanup crew. I wasn't proud with how it looked, but there were efforts that were being made to mitigate the level of how much trash it was. And I hope that for the 30th year, we can come together. I'm also petitioning to the board of directors. It does not have to be 3 days. I'm actually somebody who supports it getting less to 2 days possibly, but it should be able to stay at the Commons. So thank you for hearing us out. I hope to meet with all of you guys soon and we can have an open dialogue.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
Deb, followed by Virginia Colburn, followed by Matthew Cole.
Hi, my name is Deb Pascalano. I'm a resident in Boston, and I am literally in the park with my old dog every 3 hours. I have no objection to the rally itself. I have no objection to using cannabis. That's not the issue. There are people smoking in the park every day now, yes. Not supposed to, but they do. But when this rally's here, there's thousands of people smoking in the park, not a couple people breaking the law. I do have an objection to the destruction of the park. I see it. I mean, I'm there every 3 hours. I object to the smoking during the rally. It stinks, and I find it offensive. And I would like to be able to use the park. I object that I can't use the park during the rally. I need to physically go elsewhere to walk my dogs. There's too much drug dealing. There's too much smoking. I'm afraid that my dogs will eat something, not only the 3 days you're there, but the week afterwards. There's not, I mean, there's little pieces of stuff all over in the grass that you literally can't pick up if you're having a rally where there's grass. Kids can't use the park. Other events just don't trash the common like this event does. And I find it absurd that you don't give credit to the photos. I mean, they were taken, that's what happens. That was there. I see it. I appreciate the woman who just spoke, who actually did take some responsibility for it being a mess. And this isn't a court of law where we have to prove with our pictures and photos. I mean, all you have to do is go there. It's overly obvious. I think they should take responsibility in picking up the trash. And I think going around with a couple bags is a joke. That doesn't get all the stuff out of the grass. And it doesn't, I mean, you saw the pictures, you didn't believe, but there's a huge amount of trash. I don't understand why it can't be moved to a place where it won't destroy the park. Keep it in the city. Keep the revenue coming to the businesses. I have no issue with it. I do have an issue with the lawyer who I find it absurd that he won't take responsibility for the participants are there. It's their rally. They have participants. And I agree with what you said, Councillor. They should take responsibility. As for the police, they stand around the edges. There are too many people to do anything. And like the police officer said, if they started arresting 1, 2, you would need thousands of police there to monitor it, to not have the laws being broken. And quite honestly, I don't want to have my tax dollars having to pay for police to monitor a rally that, it's not really, that's not what I want to pay for. And I strongly urge considering a solution that will work for all. You'll have free speech. Do it responsibly, and do it somewhere where it won't destroy our park. A move would be a solution, and I don't know why. I mean, you want it in Boston? Have it in Boston. Have it somewhere where it won't destroy our park.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Virginia Colburn, followed by Matthew Cole, followed by Bill Flynn. Is Virginia or Matthew here? I'm sorry? Okay, thank you. So then Matthew Cole and Bill, if Matthew's not here, Bill Flynn. Oh, yes.
Good afternoon, councilors. Thanks for having us all here to speak on our event. My name is Bill Flynn, and I'm the president of the Mass Cannabis Reform Coalition. I'm 32 years sober. I'm also 25 years cancer survivor. I got involved in this to give people a voice about free speech, about trying to heal themselves. When I got involved with MassCan back in '94, it was a very terrible situation where people were being constantly arrested. And it still happens to this day. What MassCan does, and what we do to this day, is we're not a pro-cannabis group per se, we're an anti-prohibition group. We're here to educate the public on the wellness of cannabis and its uses, its many uses, whether it be medical or industrial. I'm also a partner in the first hemp coalition group that's actually being run here in Massachusetts for the first time in over 81 years. So again, education is coming at you. The ignorance of prohibition is still alive today, and you can see it here today and hear it. Very surprised, out of all the education that we've been doing over at the Common for the past 29 years, that the ignorance is still alive and well. Okay, this is nothing but harassment towards us. We've worked with the Friends of the Parks, and again, they never provide us information. We go back to our membership, we discuss it with our membership, and we'll work on it. Everything that was brought up, we're willing to work with. But I'll tell you right now, we're not going anywhere. This is MassCan, this is the Boston Freedom Rally, okay? The Boston Freedom Rally had over, say, tens of thousands of people in a 2.5-day period. where there was no violence, no arrests, right? Yeah, civil disobedience is the main thing, along with education. Yes, you're not supposed to smoke on the common, but that's what civil disobedience is about. Wake up and find out what civil disobedience is about. We provide the largest free concert in Massachusetts, if not on the East Coast. Yes, we're the second largest cannabis rally going on, only rivaled to Seattle Hemp Fest. That's it, okay? Again, we've been doing this for years. Since 2008, when decrim started, the police backed off. Arrests declined year after year. 2014, we had medical marijuana. Again, educating the public, educating the medical marijuana program that is alive and well today. Okay? 2016 was the so-called legalization. We don't look at it as legalization because it's at the federal level, it's still prohibited.
Thank you.
Work on it, please. Because like I said, we're not going away. We're here to educate, and that's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody Black is next, followed by David Duhart and Beatrice Nesson. Unless, I'm sorry, sir, are you Matthew Cole?
No.
Okay.
Bill Clendaniel, I thought you took my name.
If I don't think I have yet, sir, but, oh, we may have, I haven't seen you sign in, but we can get to you after these next three things are moving. Jody Black, David Duhart, Beatrice Nesson.
Good afternoon. This is, like many of your hearings, a hearing of endurance. And first of all, I want to thank you, City Councilors in general, and Matt for chairing this hearing. It's long overdue. HempFest has been a contentious issue for many residents of Boston. As I said, my name's Beatrice Nesson. I live on Beacon Hill. I grew up in Brighton. I've gone to Boston Public Schools, and I currently am a board member of the Friends of Public Garden, and I chair the Common Committee. The Common, you've heard a lot. I'm not going to repeat it, but the Common is one of its major problems. It's loved to death. And the rally is one of the arduous lovers that ends up hurting the Common, as you've heard. There are several points I want to briefly make. One is I respect the right of free speech. I respect the right of people to smoke marijuana. I have no problems with that as long as they don't injure others. In terms of right of free speech, it's not clear to me how long, what the duration should be for right of free speech in Boston public parks. Is it 1 day? Is it 1 hour? Is it 2 hours? Is it a week? Is it a month? That needs to be defined. Clearly, the other message that you've heard today, even by members of MassCan, is that this past year's event was of a size that the organization wasn't able to manage. You are looking for a way to solve this problem for the city, for a dialogue, a compromise, and I'm sure there is one. But you need to think about location, you need to think about duration, you need to think about the investment in the parks, you need to think about access to those parks, especially the Common, by others, and you need to think about the neighborhood, the neighbors and the communities around the park, what their rights are, as well as the enjoyment by others in the city and tourists. Those are my major issues. I do have one question, and I don't know what the legal answer is, but I think Councillor Edwards raised a very valid point, which is that permit holders need to be responsible for those people attending their festival. And to claim no responsibility is really irresponsible. So I would like to find out more about the legality of it, but I think even from a kind of a civic consciousness, the organizers not only should educate the public about the benefits of marijuana and how to use it, but they should also remind their attendees that there are laws and regulations and permit requirements that as attendees they need to respect. And I hope that out of this hearing we will be able to come up with a good compromise, a good solution that results in proper management of an event that is so important to so many people, and the protection of the common, which is even more important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sir, we can take you next before I get to the next trio. If you could again say your name.
Thank you, Councillor. Bill Clendaniel. I live in the South End. I'm Councillor Flynn's constituent. I'm also on the board of the Friends of the Public Garden. Much of what has been said I agree with. I'm not going to repeat it. I haven't heard anybody here today question the value of free speech. That's just not an issue. And we've heard a lot of people talk on and on about it, but that's not the issue here. And I really appreciate all of you taking the time to try to think through what's the balance. In today's world, free speech is probably even more important than it's been for a long time. So I don't think there's any disagreement about that. It's a question of balancing interests. People talked about the Red Sox parade. And I have watched over the many years the enormous demonstrations on the Mall in Washington. And to my knowledge, they don't go on for more than one day. You can have a freedom rally, you can do all the things that you want to say and try to educate people, and I've learned a lot today here, but there's no need to have 3 days or even 2 days, I submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Lucas Thayer. Is Lucas here? Oh, Lucas, great. After you, Lucas, we're going to get to Jennifer Castiglione and Brooke Andrade.
Hi. It looked like someone accidentally left their trash in city property, so I'm going to go ahead and take out their trash for them. That's okay. That's what we do. I've been attending the Freedom Rally, since like 2000 or so. So it's been a while. And it's traditionally held in the Boston Common. We'll be holding it on the Boston Common every year. And I think I agree that it shouldn't be 3 days because it was really packed. I was here. I was a vendor and here for the 3-day event. And it was packed. It was so packed that one might think that an event being so packed, you should probably spread it out over the course of a greater number of days. I think 7 would be an appropriate number of days for the Freedom Rally to last, because if you spread it out over the number of 7 days, then let's say we have the same 60,000 attendees, they would be spread out over the course of 7 days, not just 3, so it would actually be a more sparsely populated event throughout this 7-day festival that I'm proposing. And the free speech aspect is really something that keeps coming up. Y'all say you're not trying to limit free speech, and we're saying we're trying to have our free speech. I remember my friends over at Boston Common getting beaten up by cops because they weren't allowed to have their free speech. We need to be able to protest both the federal and state prohibition of cannabis. Cannabis is prohibited de facto by city councils all over the state, city councils and boards of selectmen. I'm in a small town, Harvard, so we have a board of selectmen, and boards of selectmen and city councils are really fighting against the legal stores, so there need to be vendors. There need to be vendors allowed on the Boston Common to sell cannabis. And there need to be options for people to go and buy cannabis right now because people want to obtain it, and sometimes they're not able to grow it in their living spaces because they're in shared living spaces, or they don't have the know-how, or they have a small basement, which is a little bit moldy. So growers that are able to cultivate larger amounts should be encouraged and allowed to sell cannabis openly in this, what you call an open air market. I'm absolutely advocating for that. And I mean, the police officer was very responsible when saying that they're not interested in enforcing these little smoking violations, because 1 or 2 smoking violations being enforced really does incite a crowd, really does get a group of people more motivated to protest harder. And as a government agency, I think you should want people to not protest quite so hard and do whatever you can to give us what we're asking/telling for you to give us, which is the opportunity to smoke and sell cannabis to each other on the Boston Common every second or third weekend of September every year. And I really feel like whether this body chooses to move the Boston Freedom Rally arbitrarily to any other location, the Boston Freedom Rally will happen on the Boston Common, like really with or without the permit. There will be a lot of public smoking on the Boston Common every second and third weekend of September as a celebration that we did win, in a way. We won the fact that we're able to possess it in public, but we didn't because governments are so adamantly stopping these legal businesses from applying for their permits, and the lack of, we're not allowed to have 1 and 3 day event licenses. That's something that the Massachusetts Recreational Consumer Council is fighting for. And so that's something this city council really should be working with the Cannabis Control Commission on, is permitting this Boston Freedom Rally as a 7-day temporary cannabis event where we are allowed to sell and distribute cannabis. I also feel that the Boston Common and the Boston Public Garden should be used to grow cannabis because it's a wonderful garden space, and people that say they care about plants should really care about plants enough to actually grow cannabis on the public garden because it's great for soil. It remediates the terrible trash that people have left.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and I'm really sorry you broke your little hammer, so you got really mad earlier.
If you're gonna pick up trash, Lucas, please pick up the apples as well that you brought in and left in. That's all. Thank you.
Which apples? These two?
The two that have been left there.
These two. Okay. Also, I wanted to mention that after
okay,
the Boston
Jennifer
Freedom Rally, I did
Castiglione,
give away
Brooke
thousands of pounds
Andrade,
of free apples.
Joseph Nelson.
Would anyone else like an apple before I get told to remove them? Want an apple?
Jennifer Castiglione. Are you Jennifer?
Hello, yes, I'm Jennifer Castiglione. I am not a direct member of MassCon, but I am a volunteer with MassCon. I have been photographing their rally for the past 5 years solid. I have thousands of images that will show everyone in this room and anyone that is interested, they're public, to show you the culture, the spirit that is the Boston Freedom Rally. You will not see violence. You will not see anger. You will see unity, community, Black, Asian, Hispanics, everybody coming together to celebrate, to speak, to be together, to stand up for legalization and our freedom to commune as one. And that is what the Boston Freedom Rally is. And I am more than happy to provide any of you with any of my images that are time-stamped with date, time, the year, my camera settings that will show you what the rally is. You will see children, you will see newborn babies there with their mothers. I am a mother of 2. I cannot wait to bring my children there to show them how safe it is. I also work in Boston, and I work in the manner of public safety. I'm a security guard at one of the major theaters here, and I walk through the Boston Common 3 to 5 times a week. Let me tell you, I feel more unsafe leaving work at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night from this theater to walk through that common than I do walking around with $3,000 to $5,000 worth of camera gear on my back during the Boston Freedom Rally. So to say that safety is a matter of concern for this is absurd. As a woman, as a single white woman walking through the Boston Common at night, I am scared crapless. I walk around with mace. With $3,000 to $5,000 worth of camera gear and the Boston Freedom Rally, I walk around without fear because I'm amongst community. I am amongst a large 10,000 group of people that are looking out for each other, that care, amongst medical patients, amongst seniors, amongst businessmen like yourselves. I have also worked with medical marijuana patients as well that are a vast expansion of children, juveniles, all the way up to seniors as well that come to this rally to experience this, to get educated, to be amongst other people that feel like they are a sense of community. They're not being chastised or looked upon as criminals. Could you imagine a grandmother going to a festival and wanting to be educated upon her new medical use? Well, these grandmothers can come here. These juveniles can come here with their parents and be educated. I personally have educated people myself, and I have images of others educating those. I have images of the Hare Krishnas coming in and celebrating with everybody and dancing. I have images of people coming in from Chinatown and playing their instruments to the crowds, and the crowd sitting there enjoying this. So to say that it also discourages community coming in, I have images of that it calls crap. If you guys want to show images of people with trash, I will show you the exact opposite. And I have thousands of those images over the past 5 years. And I have worked with MassCon for the past 10 years directly as a volunteer. And it's absurd for it to call it anything less than a community event that just, it brings everyone together in the manner of freedom, and we deserve that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brooke Andrade, Joseph Nelson, Stephen Jeffries.
Hi, my name is Brooke Andrade, and I have been attending the Boston Freedom Rally since 1994 in various capacities. When I first went to my first Freedom Rally, I was a young kid. I didn't know much about cannabis. I went there, and just from walking around and talking with people at the various booths, you know, I gained a different perspective of it. And over the next few years, there were a lot more arrests. So I stopped going for a few years, and then back in, I want to say it was 2009, I started going again as a volunteer with MassCan. And the people in the community that I encounter when I go to the rally is unlike any other gathering of any number of people. I work merchandise for a lot of local bands. I see a lot of shows. I go to a lot of concerts. And every single one of them, there's fights, there's violent incidents, and there's none of that at the rally. To say that safety, again, to say that safety is a concern is awful. And I'm also coming as a patient. I'm on dialysis. I use cannabis daily to help me with all the side effects of it. And MassCan was gracious enough last year to give me an entire booth for the Donate Life cause. And we signed up a lot of people to be organ donors and educated a lot of people on different subjects that is cannabis related, but can also be related to different areas of health. And people need that information as well. So an organization that just wants to help educate people to be healthy and to make choices for themselves, to not just view marijuana as like, oh, people just want to get high. It is medicine. Without marijuana, I wouldn't be able to walk from here to my car. Obviously my friends drive me, but I wouldn't be able to walk from here to there. So it's just to restrict the way that it's being presented, and to restrict basically over pictures that have no timestamps, have no, from the pictures I've seen, they're saying that trash was left there, but it all looks like it's midday. It could be during the vendor cleanup, who knows? We have time-stamped photos of a common that isn't trashed, and it's, in a relative time frame. It wasn't perfect this year because it was a lot bigger than it normally is. But I mean, MassCan is willing to work with them and come up with a solution to the issues that you have. So I don't see why it should just be cut off, And having it on the common again is very symbolic. So that's one of the things that makes it one of the best rallies that there is because of the location.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you. Joseph Nelson, Stephen B. Jeffries, and Jeremiah McKinnon.
Hello, I would like to thank you guys all for having this hearing today and for having us here to speak. My name is Joseph Nelson. I'm a resident of Carver, Massachusetts, though I did live in Boston for most of my life. I come here speaking as a local business owner, someone who has volunteered with the Freedom Rally for many years, who's been going for a good portion of my life. I'm not going to repeat a lot of points that we've heard today. There's been good points made on both sides. There were obviously issues with this year's rally that need to be addressed. I just ask that we work together to actually address these issues, not argue with each other, and find a way to make this happen again. The Freedom Rally has been here for 29 years, going on 30. It's one of the biggest things for a reason. It's big, and it has a lot of positive messages and end results of the rally itself, and I would just love to see it continue at the Boston Commons. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Stephen Jeffries, Jeremiah McKinnon, and that is all that I have that has signed up. If anyone would additionally like to testify whose name I didn't call or who had a change of heart, whom we haven't heard from, please line up after Mr. McKinnon.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. My name is Stephen Jeffries. I'm a 58-year-old resident of Boston. I live at 12 Brimmer Street, which is 2.5 blocks from the Common. I've lived there since I was 2 years old in 1962. This rally has gotten bigger over time, and it is now a 3-day event, which unfortunately places the Common under unparalleled stress. And I cannot advise you on the law. I haven't looked into it, but I would like to see it moved to a location that would be easier to clean up after it's done. For example, the City Hall Plaza here. And the other thing my advice would be, frankly, is to ring it with cops and arrest those who are smoking anything, since my understanding is in Boston it is a $250 fine to smoke a cigarette or a cigar or anything else in the Common itself. So I do not know how that is consistent with the issuance of a permit for an organization that promotes smoking in that particular venue. Ironically, I understand it to be legal to smoke on the sidewalk, but not in the Common. I have nothing further to add except to say that it puts our Common under a hell of a lot of stress, and I think that's unfair for everybody else who wants to transit that particular facility during those 3 days, especially those of us who have children. Mine are grown, but there are a lot of people in the neighborhood who have small ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Mr. McKinnon? May have lost Jeremiah McKinnon. All right, so if there's anyone else. Are you Jeremiah?
I'm Jeremiah, yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you. And then, ma'am, you can follow Jeremiah, and then if you want, you can follow two people after Jeremiah. Thank you.
Hi there. So my name is Jeremiah McKinnon. I live in Peabody. I'm an attendee of the Freedom Rally, and I have been since 2012. I'm a medical marijuana patient, valid, registered medical marijuana patient. I actually just grabbed some medicine before I came here, and I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to speak because I didn't know if I was going to have enough time or if you guys would wrap up beforehand. So I want to start off just by saying, rhetorically, does anyone here want to tell me where I can consume my medical marijuana without harassment? I mean, I agree with what Shannon said earlier. You'll go to the Boston Common now, and you'll probably find someone smoking marijuana. And I mean, after this meeting, I might be going to consume marijuana myself in the Boston Common. But what we've seen with medical marijuana dispensaries locating in Boston and across Massachusetts is cities, residents, councilors saying, not in my backyard. And we had plenty of city councilors in Massachusetts and Boston stand up against the dispensary that was here in Milk Street that actually opened. The notion that the event organizer should be responsible for the actions and behavior of anyone who walks through the Common, I think that's absolutely absurd. That means any heroin user or cannabis user can sabotage any event. How is an event attendee supposed to be Big Brother, watching over the shoulder of any individual who walks into the Boston Common? Like I said, people are going to consume on the Common, and I'm not sure why we want to single out people that are using marijuana and saying that, you know, we almost don't want you in our park, and you know, we have a annual Freedom Rally that happens every year, but we're gonna try to do things like limit it or you know, things that will help, that will as Bill President Maskin said, it feels like harassment for these people that have fought for so long to get their rights to possessing legal marijuana, to being able to use it. And like I said, there's no one can give me an answer as to where I can use marijuana. I have to find a private place to do it, and there's no places to do it. And Lucas, he's 100% right. If you guys decide not to issue a permit to the Boston Freedom Rally this year, tens of thousands of people will still show up, and tens of thousands of people will still use marijuana. This is a culture it's been going on for decades here in Massachusetts, and giving that permit is not going to stop people from that tradition. My only other comment is, you know, what are we to do? Are we going to create a sovereign nation where there's no constituents that will be upset if the event is held in that sovereign nation? Do we want to have one of maybe the islands over, so that no one, you know, the islands around Massachusetts, maybe that will bother no one? Honestly, people have voted for it. It's been going on for 20 years, And I agree with everybody here that wants to take the approach of working together with the Friends of the Public Garden, with MassCan Normal, with the City of Boston, instead of the rude comments that I heard from some people on this city council saying that the comments from the representatives of MassCan Normal were dumb. I really think that's inappropriate. And I think that's where the tone came from this afternoon, where I really don't think that the people of MassCan were given the respect that they deserve, but I do think that moving forward, that certain things like maybe limiting the event to 2 days, I could support, but I could not support moving it from the Boston Common, the home of free speech and liberty. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that has concluded who has signed in to the formal testimony. I know anyone else who would like to testify who hasn't spoken thus far, you're welcome to do so. We'll start with you, ma'am, and then there's behind you, there was a gentleman who was next, so thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Tully, and I'm the Executive Director of the Beacon Hill Civic Association. On behalf of the Civic Association, I'd like to thank City Councilors Josh Zakem and Ed Flynn for sponsoring this matter, for you, Committee Chair Matt O'Malley, and for the other councilors in this room for bringing this matter forward and giving us a venue to discuss this. The Beacon Hill Civic Association is a nonprofit organization representing Beacon Hill with over 800 active members. Our mission is to preserve the quality of life on Beacon Hill through historic preservation, civic engagement, and community development. Our goal as neighbors helping neighbors is to maintain this historic neighborhood as a clean, safe, and livable place for families and residents of all ages. Councilors Flynn and Zakem originally filed a request for this hearing on the event, citing complaints about illegal activities and permit violations at this year's 3-day event that took place during the period September 14 through 16, 2018. Among the ideas the City Council should consider, the request stated, was having the event move off the Boston Common to some other more appropriate venue. We shared the belief that the Boston Common is not an appropriate venue for this event. We have heard from our members about their concerns that having the event at the park is not appropriate due to the large size of the event, the general rowdiness of the event participants, and the continued failure by the event organizers to follow the requirement of the permits that they were granted to run this event. We have received complaints concerning the continued presence of parked cars on the green space during the event, of overnight camping by event participants in the park, and of the leaving of massive amounts of trash, including used hypodermic needles strewn in the park. Such complaints also included comments by our members that they did not feel safe in the Boston Common during the event this year. The BHCA fully supports the efforts of the Friends of the Public Garden, which earlier this year raised significant concerns about the event as the size of its crowds has grown. And the Friends have shared photographs with us of the incredible disarray, including garbage, used food containers, used cooking oil, and other organic waste, which the Friends have described as beyond anything we have seen in years past, and said required hours of overtime for cleanup. Some of the comments that were received before, during, and after the recent Boston Freedom Rally on the Boston Common in my office included the following, and these are quotations. I'm planning to bring my family on our annual visits to Boston and Beacon Hill. Will it be safe to visit the Common this year? The Hempfest participants were selling smoking apparatus in a park where smoking is banned. Minors were exposed to the message of drug use in our public park, where there is a merry-go-round and a playground. There is clearly a conflict in values and messages here. What can we do? It was such a dangerous event. I saw a woman urinating in front of everyone by the Frog Pond near the playground. The Boston Common was a disgrace. It was sad to see our Parks Department cleaning up after so much disrespect. I hope the Hempfest event can not only be moved from the Common in the future, but also focus on education and awareness, and not be an enabling event for so much negative and disruptive behavior.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. Tully.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Joe Gilmore. I'm a lifelong resident of Boston. I'm a college student at UMass Boston, and I first attended the Boston Freedom Rally about 10 years ago. I was 16 years old. During these events, I've never seen any sort of nefarious or violent acts like you could say about some of the other events that happened in Boston, like other people have said. Last year at Patriots Parade, I saw somebody get punched out in front of me across the street. I've never seen something like that at the Freedom Rally. And I feel that it's more of an educational sort of message that we're trying to send. I was on the Mascan Education Village panel, Education Village, and it's just an important platform that I look forward to every year to promote the idea of civic engagement, about safe consumption, and about equity and developing an industry that's actually going to be reflective of our community. So I just want to say, I want to repeat what other people have said before me, that whether or not this permit is granted, there will be people that show up, but we need to be proactive instead of reactive and think about ways that we can work together and mitigate the concerns of the civic members. And just with that said, I look forward to next year's rally at the Boston Freedom, at the Boston Common. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmore. Is there anyone else who hasn't yet spoken who would like an opportunity to speak? Sir?
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name's Arturo Gossage. I'm a longtime resident of a Chinatown's neighborhood here in Boston. I was asked to come and speak for my neighbors who can't be here. A lot of them work full-time jobs and they're low income. But the free speech issue isn't anything that I think we want to tackle, right? People are allowed to say what they want to say, allowed to do what they want to do, to a certain extent. When, like an example I gave that people don't like is when Gun Owners Action League comes to Boston Common to protest, they don't carry firearms out in the open, and they don't wave around loaded rifles. It's one thing they don't do, but they come and they express their opinion, and they're allowed to do that. In Chinatown, we have an issue with air pollution, and the smoke from Hempfest this year actually did make its way down Tremont to an elderly community. And a lot of those elderly are impacted by this, and we have a lot of work we do with Tufts Medical Center to try and get some data on pollution particle sizes and whatnot. So we're not asking, I think, so much for people's rights to be trampled on as far as freedom of speech goes, or even a right to assembly. But I think we're just asking people to be good neighbors, right? Being good neighbors is important for any community and for making communities happy. And we've heard a lot of people from the Hempfest community say that they're willing to work with us and be good neighbors and good visitors, and I think that's a positive aspect of what we can have here. There was some violence that did happen at Hempfest this year, and there's proof of it, there's video of it, and I have it for whoever wants to see it. I'm a photographer myself, as the young lady who was up here earlier. I know a lot about photos. I know how to pull data out of photos, and one of my photos even brought down somebody who was stealing money from the marathon after the bombing took place. So all I'm asking is I think we should probably work together and try to make a positive neighborhood experience for everybody.
Great.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Maggie Kinsella. I'm the press secretary for Mascan Normal. And I think what we really want to hear right now are the complaints and the remedial solutions as far as what happened and how we can prevent it from happening next year, and addressing some of the misconceptions that surrounded some of the activities that happened. So one of them was sound. We did address that at the event, so that was taken care of before we actually received the complaints. So there are things that we self-corrected. As far as consuming cannabis in a public place, Mascan, we set up the Education Village area, which included the Summit Lounge and the gazebo, as an idea of what a social consumption event would look like without promoting consumption itself because of the laws on the common. We have on our website the laws that it is not legal to smoke on the common, the consequences of if you get fined. So we promote the laws themselves as far as what can happen should you choose to act in civil disobedience. So those are up there on our website, how to safely enjoy the common. But we had a safe space for consumers to come in where they could interact with companies, learn more about cannabis, being an older crowd. We do have a younger crowd that comes in. We had bracelets. We were promoting the ID checking, being around products. As a volunteer organization, we hire a vending company, and we went with a new company this past year that we are very well aware of some of the things that happened that were not taken care of per the contract that we drew up with them. So one of the things that we would be doing is working with a more experienced concessions company next year or taking it on ourselves with an event management platform company so that we can closely monitor the contracts and what is being violated without having to be here and defending ourselves when things were very clearly laid out, including trash. There was a lot of confusion with vendors. I personally went around to vendors, and any selling of items, any signs that were up, I told them to take down. It was not legal. And so they were confused about the gifting laws in Massachusetts as far as people being able to purchase an item like a t-shirt and get a gift of cannabis with it. And so there was a huge miseducation along with the inaccessibility of cannabis products that people came into it, and it turned into what people saw as an open drug market. We do not want that. It is an educational event. We would like to promote the Education Village area as it was set up to be a bigger part of what the event is, and maybe less vending. You know, those are things that we've definitely talked about and would like to mitigate for next year. Anything like underage sales that happened, please provide us the evidence of that. We are not okay with that. That's important to us, and we take that seriously. Site cleanliness. That was, again, something that we had addressed with the contract. There was no teeth in vendors not having their trash cans. There was no check-in for that, so we're going to have very clear-cut guidelines for vendors next year to ensure that doesn't happen, including a lot of offers from different companies to not only take care of the management of event cleanup as event management companies doing that for events themselves, but also cannabis community businesses that have offered to help with that, because we were the first group to post a picture of one of these sites of trash. That was on our page first, because we were disappointed about that. But I would like to also point out that half was spent on overtime for cleanup this year, and I would like that to say that we are improving that process with the size of the event that it has grown to. Better security. We do care about the safety of attendees, including the layout of the event so that it's far more spacious. I personally don't like to walk through crowds. I was going all the way around running back and forth because there was some congested areas, and those are things that we can improve on. So I have this I can email you, because there are links about other events and open container laws that were violated. So we hope that these things will be looked into for other events.
Thank you.
As
You
well.
can email that to me, and I'll make sure all members of the committee receive it. Thank you. Is there anyone else who hasn't testified who would like to testify?
That's a hard act to follow. Hi, my name is Melissa Faulkner, a resident of Salem, Mass. I have the pleasure of being Bill Bones' neighbor. Usually neighbors are overrated, right? I hit the jackpot with this one. I've come to the cannabis world through epilepsy. I have two children, a 5 and a 20-year-old with epilepsy. Cannabis to me has always been my perception of it when I was younger, and people smoking, drinking, playing video games, being unproductive. So I haven't always had the best perception. This was my first year coming to this event. I was so ignorant to the event that Bill and I would often meet while I was waiting for a placement for my 5-year-old son, who goes actually to the Manville here in well, not here, but in Roxbury, because of his epilepsy. He approached me and helped educate me and was a friend to me and was supportive of me. And when I saw the event happening at the Common, I reached out to him saying, "Oh, did you hear about this event?" And he's like, "Oh, you're coming to the party, right? You're coming to join all of us." And I'm, wow, okay, cool. I came as a volunteer. What I found was very caring people. I didn't feel unsafe. I felt part of a family. I feel part of a family. I know this family cares about the Commons. They care about people. They don't want to cause any problems or any issues. And as Maggie said, these issues would be addressed. I don't want this to be my first and my last experience at the Freedom Rally. I would really love to see this continue, and for everyone to find a happy medium and a common ground for this one weekend a year. One weekend a year. It's not like it's every weekend. I also came into another position in the cannabis world. I am an executive assistant and director of media relations for Cannabis Radio Network, working aside my 20-year-old epileptic son, who's also the executive producer. I am grateful for this experience. Not grateful for the epilepsy, but I'm grateful for my world being opened up and me being educated. MassCan is about education. We're not about causing problems or causing issues. I appreciate this opportunity to come here and speak. I did not prepare anything, as you see. I'm great with people, not great with public speaking, so I apologize. But I just thank you for this opportunity, and I ask you to please look at everything and work with us as the MassCan world and the cannabis world, and a parent trying to be educated and do the best I can with my children, which, by the way, I would feel completely comfortable with bringing to this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate that testimony. All right. Anyone else? All right.
For myself, I did sign up.
You did sign up. You may speak. It's 2 minutes. I've never seen in 8 years someone on a panel testify at the public testimony, but you are welcome to do so, John. Just keep it to 2 minutes, please.
I came here only to be assisting the MassCan people as they presented, and I took their place. And I am not the grand conciliator. I am not a negotiator. I am a lawyer of last resort. I am a litigator. And I donate my time freely to the state. I get paid by the state too. I'm on the murder panel. I've been a CPCS appointed lawyer since 1992. I have tried murder cases in all of the courts of the Commonwealth, and I've been on trying Superior Court cases and district court cases, and I sit on the Suffolk Lawyers for Justice, which is the advisory panel that administers the contract for all of the court-appointed lawyers that are not CPCS lawyers for the city of Boston. I am not a rich lawyer. I am not a rich lawyer at all. I grew up living in Charlestown when I went to law school at BU. I have volunteered my time all over this state, both for this organization and other organizations. I think that what I've heard here that may have incensed me is that I can't help but think that most of the people that have been talking and the tone that's been set by the city councilors here has been, by and large, more of the same of the aggressive, we don't want you and your organization to exist, we don't want you and your organization to get what it's gotten, and we don't want you to continue having this rally. Frankly, the Apple guy has the best ideas I've heard in this whole room today, and it's been that you guys should be on our side. You guys should be sponsoring MassCan, sponsoring the rally, saying this is who we are. We are the cradle of liberty, for Christ's sake. You could all be, we could have arts festivals as part of this. We could have speakers from the city come talk. We have achieved legalization. Let's embrace it. Instead of, this is the last dying gasp of people that don't think that they're, well, it says that one of the people that spoke a little earlier said that we have a conflict in values and message. We shouldn't. Frankly, the battle has been won. It's been won by free speechers and free legalization people. And it's time for the city to get behind us, as opposed to continuing to, I would say, nitpick us to death, but trash us to death or whatever. Why can't we get you guys to endorse us, be part of us?
Thank you.
We'll accept you all as members.
Thank you. I'm going to now, if no one else would like to speak, I presume. Okay. We'll now get into any closing statements. We'll start with the two lead authors, starting with Councillor Zakem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank the Friends of the Public Garden for the work they do every day on preserving and improving our public spaces and our parks, and the folks who took time to be here. I do want to thank MassCan, and I want to thank Bill and your team for your advocacy over the years. Since it seems like we're all getting into how we voted on these referendums, I voted yes for medical marijuana, I voted yes for adult use marijuana, and I have formally supported dispensaries of both types to locate in the city of Boston. Having said that, I regret the tone that came in here, and I'm going to disagree with John's last statement that the negative tone came from this side of the room. Bill, you and many of your board members, I think, were effective advocates, approached this in similar way that the Friends of the Public Garden did to try and address some of these issues. John may be a very effective First Amendment litigator, and I think, as he just said, he's not the conciliator. I think that was one of the issues with what happened in this hearing, and I appreciate that other folks representing your organization, board members, volunteers, yourself as an individual, have said that we can move forward on this. The intent of this hearing was to have this discussion, was to get people in the room, whether it's from the Parks Department, the Police Department, neighbors, MassCan, other advocates, was to have the discussion that I think, despite some of these contentious digressions, we did have a fairly constructive discussion today. I think that's important. Addressing the issues of maybe moving it to 2 days instead of 3, of working better on a trash plan and a cleanup plan is absolutely common ground that we should be addressing on. There is no intent in filing this hearing order to prohibit this rally or this event. Now, I understand, in going back 3 decades of history, there is a lot there. There's a lot that you have fought and dealt with before we decriminalize, before we are on our slow road to adult use recreational marijuana in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But this is a new day in the city of Boston. I think this is a new day on this body. And to be honest, although I understand it, I am somewhat resentful of the statements that some made, not all, that this is an intent to prohibit this rally. This is to address specific concerns. I think you heard from a lot of neighbors who have attended in the past, who have supported in the past, who said there was a big change this year. Your folks acknowledge that as well. It's grown in size. That's a success. Kudos to making a successful event, but we need to plan and make sure that the negative impacts are mitigated, just like whether it's the Outside the Box Festival. If people want to talk about the Red Sox parade, we work with the Red Sox. They hire people to clean up all around Fenway Park after all their games. We work to clean up after that. So this is, I think, been a constructive hearing. I want to thank you for participating. I want to thank my colleague, Councillor Flynn, for co-sponsoring this, Councillor O'Malley for maintaining order in this hearing, and for working with us. And I hope this is a continued building forward of this. So thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Zachem. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley, for conducting this meeting and for conducting it very professionally, and for your leadership. And I want to say thank you to my colleague, Councillor Zachem, for your leadership on this issue, and more importantly, for working for so many years to make our Boston Common and our public garden one of the most beautiful parks in the country. So I want to thank Councillor Zachem for all his work. The final analysis, in my opinion, the Boston Common is one of the oldest public spaces in the country and the most beautiful park in the United States. And we want it to remain that way for everybody, for children, seniors, the disabled, Boston residents in the area, families, veterans, and tourists. And as Councillor Zachem talked about, there is some common ground that we could work together on. But we have to be respectful to both sides, and the organizers have to be respectful to us as well. We have an obligation, myself and Councillor Zachem, we take it very seriously. We have an obligation to our constituents. I hope everyone understands that when our constituents ask us for help, we're there for them, and we go to bat for them. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that their issues are addressed in the city. And that's about quality of life issues for our residents. They want clean parks. They want to be able to take their children to parks. They want safe streets. And that's what we do as a Boston City Council, is we represent our constituents, and we represent them the best we can. We work hard. So that's something we take very seriously. And as Councillor Zachem said, I think there's some common ground that we could find on this issue. But you also have to work with us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor McCarthy? Oh, sorry, just left Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Edwards.
Brief. I want to say thank you for all of you for coming and staying the entire time. I do acknowledge that it's an expensive city to live in. People have jobs, and so for you to take the time out of the middle of a workday to be here all day is a burden sometimes, and I do appreciate you giving all of your opinions. I agree with a lot of what the sentiment that's been said here. The Boston Common is not just Boston's. It is a shared, beautiful, historic space for the entire country, if not the world. That being said, the burdens of that park are not shared globally, or not shared nationally, or not shared even by all of Boston. Those burdens are shared or predominantly placed on the shoulders of the neighborhoods that are surrounding the park. And so it is important when we're having a global conversation about what this means, we also acknowledge the local impact. And I do appreciate those who came from Solutions and those who are just honest that there was trash there. I don't think that has to be debated. That you can fix that also doesn't have to be debated. The question for me is that, and I think that's something that's worth a continued conversation, is when we issue a permit, period, as the City of Boston, and there's standards set in there, why wouldn't we assume that the person who took the permit will meet those standards? Why not? Why wouldn't we assume that they would follow the laws of the park or the location that they choose to have their event? That's a question maybe for you. I understand when that event and that location means something quite historic, and the message is maybe the location for you. But that's I think, a very basic question. These are standards. This is not about necessarily your organization. It would be if you were also a beer garden trying to do the same thing without a permit and allowing alcohol to flow as well. So these are standards that have been set. And if those standards about drinking and smoking have a free speech argument, I'm sure your litigator will happily rise to the occasion and fight that. But the question is, in as much as they're not, they're standards that are there. And that's something I think your organization should consider. I also think that, I can't remember the young man who testified, but he said that there was someone who was asked to come there to actually create a 21+ area, right? And in as much as you are trying to operate as best as you can, maybe within the permitting that you don't have access to, I think that's at least a demonstration of good faith on your part. But acknowledging when something wasn't done right, when the trash was there, when maybe it got out of hand in a way that we just didn't expect at 50,000 people is also important, coming with a just total transparent conversation about that. To dismiss that, to call people YIMBYs, to really just take it, I think, in a negative tone. And I'm not going to say I was part of it at all. I will say that it came from, I came in the middle of it, actually, and I would say it came from that side of the table, specifically your attorney. And I think that should be acknowledged. Again.
Okay.
Again. An example, if you will, of the continued wonderful tone. So my point is, I look forward to working with you. This is the first time I've seen many of you or met any of you at all. I know some of the folks in the Civic Association. Maybe we can continue to talk about how this can grow and how we can actually have an adult conversation. I'd love to meet your board members. The woman left too early. I wanted to introduce myself to her. I think we need to have an adult conversation. It starts with getting to know each other. So I'm here on the 5th floor. Look forward to getting to know you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Thank you all. We are now wrapping up the hearing on docket number 1421 in the Council's Committee on Environment, Sustainability, and Parks. The hearing is hereby adjourned.